Open our agenda for the Architectural Board review for July 24th of 2023 and start with a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I'll take a roll call. Chair Moore?
Here.
Vice Chair Six?
Here.
Board Member Anderson? Here. Board Member Black?
Here.
Board Member Noon?
Here.
And Board Member Whalen?
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to public comment. General public comment, please.
Thank you. With general public comment, if there's anyone in the room who would like to speak on general business, that's items not on today's agenda, please fill out a speaker slip over on the side and turn it in. Not seeing any movement for, oh, we might have not general. Okay, perfect. No general public comment for in-person. We do not have any virtual participants. And then we did not receive written correspondence for general. So back to the commission, or board, excuse me. Back to you.
Okay, we'll close public comment and go to approval of the minutes from July 10th, please.
So moved. Oh,
Okay.
excuse me, I jumped
You
ahead.
are,
Go ahead and jump.
you are on it. Okay, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Any discussion on these minutes? Edits, etc.? No? Okay, let's take our vote.
Thank you. I'll take roll call vote. Chair Moore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Six?
Here. Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Noon?
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, and then consent for the 17th, please.
Thank you, Chair Moore. The consent minutes for July 17th, we had item A, 920 Summit Road. That received review after final approval. Item B, 801 Shoreline Drive, received project design and final approval with the condition that there should be some backless benches near the shower area, and there should be additional landscape boulders as the project budget will allow, as much as the project budget will allow. Then item C, the last item, received project design and final approval with the following comments. And that was it. Thank you.
I'll move to approve those minutes as submitted.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or edits? No? Let's take our vote.
Thank you. Chair Moore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Six?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Noon?
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, and today's agenda.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So today we had 3 items. Item A, 3931 Via Diego, received project design and final approval with the following conditions. Item B, 540 West Pueblo, new 6-space parking lot, received project design and final approval as well. And then lastly, we had a one-time pre-application review for 201 South Milpas for a new wireless communication tower, and the following comments were made.
I'll move to approve those minutes as submitted.
I'll second it again.
All right. They look good to me, so let's take our vote.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Are we delving into tree cell sites? These fake guys?
So the project that was in front of us today was a one-time pre-app kind of deal, and they were testing a couple of options out. And one of those options was a faux eucalyptus tree that has cell devices in it.
And that option was a possibility, given the context or whatever?
Well, 2 of the 3 board members felt that that would not be the preference.
Okay. Thank you.
And on that point, Mr. Russell, will this item return to the full board?
If they do a formal submittal, depending on what they come back with, if it's the board's wish, I could send it to full board. It's something I can keep my eye out on.
Chair Moore, I don't know if here is the time to do this, but if it's a faux tree, I think it should come to full board.
Okay.
Well, duly noted, and if they do return with such a design, I think either tower or faux tree, we can bring it back to full board.
Well, from my perspective, it just seems, because the other alternative, Mr. Six, was a structure, 50-foot tower, if you will, done in the Spanish colonial revival style, at least that was the intent. But, so we would want to see that before full board, I would guess, coming back, yes, just to make sure the detailing is what we want it to be. So it's not just the tree.
We'll cross that bridge when we
Yeah,
get there.
we'll see what they come back with. and-
Yep.
Okay, did we take our vote?
Not yet.
Let's take our vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take a roll call vote. Chair Moore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Six?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Noon?
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, on to announcements, requests by applicants, et cetera. Anything?
I might be speaking out of turn, but I do believe that we are in a special recruitment now for another ABR member, as the last attendees did not make a presentation at council. So we're trying again for a special recruitment process, and I'll keep you updated on how that goes.
Okay, thank you. Any subcommittee reports? No? Okay, let's move on from general business to item number 1, please, if we could. This is the 1200 block Carpinteria Street. This is a proposal to replace an existing structurally deficient street bridge over Sycamore Creek with a new single-span concrete bridge, includes new sidewalks, channel walls, revegetation of creek banks, street lighting, and fencing. Project design and final approval is requested and requires compliance with the project compatibility guidelines. We last saw this January 11th of 2021.
Chair Moore,
It's been a while. Yes.
just a quick statement before you start. So this is for project design approval only, not final. That was a mistake in the agenda. They'll be coming back for final. And then just wanted to note, staff has prepared a notice of exemption. This project is exempt per SEQA guidelines, section 15302, which is replacement or reconstruction of existing structures. just wanted to make that announcement for the record. It's a city project, so just to add that to our comments today. Normally don't do that.
Chair Moore,
That's all.
Yes.
exempt from what?
CEQA, further environmental review.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, did we have comments from the last go-around?
These are the minutes from January 11th, 2021.
Okay. All right. If you could introduce yourselves and take us through your responses to our comments, please.
I will start us off.
Yeah. Make sure that green light is on.
Yeah, it'll turn green. Just press it once more. It should.
There.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Moore and board members. My name is Alexis Flores. I am the acting supervising engineer for the Streets Engineering Design Group. And with me is Matt Burgard with Dewberry Engineers, our design consultant on the replacement project for the Carpinteria Street Bridge.
Thank you. So we've prepared a short presentation as well as responses to the previous comments. We'll run through the presentation first. So this project is to replace the existing Carpinteria Street Bridge over Sycamore Creek. It is an existing timber bridge that's 3 spans, that's nearly a year old, or nearly 100 years old, and it is in poor condition. The city has gotten a grant from Caltrans to replace the bridge. The project consists of removing the existing bridge and replacing it with a longer single-span bridge that is also wider. The width is the minimum that can be done per code and also through the grant application, through the grant funding. The width was set by continuing the curb lines up and down Carpinteria Street to keep them straight. Currently, the curb lines run up and down straight, but then they neck down at the existing bridge because the existing bridge is very narrow. So the new bridge just continues that curb line up. The project has drainage improvements as well, as part of the roadway improvements. The drainage was studied extensively and needs to comply with the city's post-construction stormwater requirements. That was taken through the City Creeks Department, and they concurred with the project. The project also originally it included up to 9 tree removals. The upstream trees were removed already, either by property owners or flood control. We're not sure which, but the majority of the upstream trees are non-native invasive. So our project will remove those stumps that are remaining. The downstream side, there are 3 native trees that are being removed. 2 are sycamore trees, and they are just too close to the new bridge. We have an arborist, local arborist, who's reviewed the site and concurs with the tree removals as well. And then one of the trees is a arroyo willow, and it is in very poor condition. It's been overgrown by ivy, and the recommendation was to cut it to a stump and then let it grow back. The project also includes significant revegetation upstream and downstream of the project, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. This is the profile of the new bridge. It is about 6 inches higher than the old bridge, and it's a little longer than the old bridge. The existing bridge floods during the 100-year storm, and it floods the surrounding approach roadways. The new bridge will pass that 100-year flow under the bridge and stop flooding of the street, so the street can remain open. There are a lot of overhead and underground utilities at the project site. The overhead utilities will be relocated temporarily during construction to make room for construction equipment. There is also a city-owned water and sewer line that are on the existing bridge. The water line will be removed and then put back into the new bridge. The sewer line is being removed from the bridge, and it is being rerouted to the north to an existing manhole at Kenyatta Street. So there's a benefit by not having a risk of storm debris damaging the storm line, the sewage line. The project will close the existing street to through traffic during construction. There are multiple pedestrian options for a detour as well as a vehicular detour. The vehicular detour will use Quinientos. Pedestrians can use either Quinientos or Cacique, as there's a pedestrian bridge that crosses the creek. This is the new bridge itself. It's a slab bridge that is about 2 feet deep. That will allow us to clear span the creek and have no supports in the creek. This is a rendering of the bridge. We're proposing to use a concrete bridge rail with windows similar to other bridges in the city. At the last ABR meeting, the board recommended we use circular windows for the window openings, and that's what we're doing. There was a question that came up as to whether the rail on the wing wall should be concrete or metal, and we are proposing to use a black metal rail. There's benefits to that from a maintenance standpoint during creek flooding or just general maintenance. It can be more easily removed to access the creek, but this is the rendering with a concrete wall, which is what we do not prefer. Elsewhere in the city, the same style concrete rail is used, and then off the bridge on the wing walls or the approach roadways, metal rails are used. These two are Quinientos and Punta Gorda. Quinientos is just the next bridge upstream on Sycamore Creek from our project. This is also Montecito Street and Gutierrez Street, which also use concrete rails with metal rails off the bridge. So as we were saying, there's a heavy revegetation plan associated with this project. A major part of that is non-native species removal. We're proposing to remove about 0.13 acres of ivy, blackberry, non-native trees, and clear that site so that we can revegetate. And we have a proposed revegetation plan consisting of native trees, native seed mixes, and native plants. These were the plants that were presented to the board last time, which the board concurred on. This was the tree palette, which I won't go through all of them, as well as the shrubs and perennials. For aesthetics, the bridge is proposed to have a concrete form liner that looks like sandstone, and then it will either be stained or colored concrete to make it look like sandstone. It's the material spec sheet is the same that was used on other projects in the city. And then for the parkway items, we are proposing 2 new streetlights. There's already 1 streetlight similar to the light being shown on the left here at the site, back at Carpinteria Street in Kenyatta. And then we're proposing to use fractured sandstone in the parkway. These are just some pictures of the project site, which was shown to the board last time, showing the constraints at the site. This is the city sewer line and water line. As you can see, they both hang below the bridge and are susceptible to being impacted during flows. And then this is the project's site currently, showing the upstream side where most of the trees and vegetation were already removed. Also included in your packet is the report from Bill Spiewak, our local arborist, who concurred with the tree removals and stating that they're necessary for the project. One other item to go back to that the board had raised a question on last time was let me get to it. There is a large palm tree on the kind of northeast side of the bridge. Currently, the base of that palm tree has uprooted the sidewalk and is pushing it up and out. It's hard to walk on now. The question had come up as to whether we can reroute the sidewalk in order to save the tree, and after investigation and coordination with the city, it was decided that the sidewalk should remain straight and that the palm tree will be removed. I believe if we want to go to the questions and answers document that we had submitted, or I can just read them. Yeah. So the first comment was the board appreciates the application and the upgrade of the bridge. And our response is that we appreciate this, your time. The second one was regarding the window option. We took the board's recommendation and are going with a circular option. There was a question about staining the bridge barrier, the concrete barrier, to add some color. And we have looked around the other city bridges, and they are not on there. And due to that and the fact that it creates a long-term maintenance issue, if something ever gets hit there, then that gray concrete behind it can become exposed. We are proposing to not color the concrete. There was question about traffic calming and the bridge width. We worked with the city's traffic department, and the traffic department concurred with the bridge width, as well as Caltrans, that it is the minimum that we can put out there per design code. And the city traffic department decided that speed bumps or further bulb outs of the curb were not appropriate at this project site. So there are no additional traffic calming measures being proposed. We discussed the palm tree. And, let's see, that's okay. The sixth question was about the barrier on the wing walls as to whether it should be metal or concrete, which we discussed. We prefer a black metal. And then the last comment was to study narrowing the bridge to the greatest extent possible per state guidelines. And as I mentioned, we've done that, and we cannot narrow the bridge anymore.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With that, we can open public comment for this item.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Thank you. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and fill out a speaker slip on the side of the room and turn it in to me. And then turning to virtual while I wait for that. If anyone joining virtually would like to speak on this item, item 1, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands. We did receive written correspondence from Paulina Kahn, which was distributed to the board prior to the meeting. And then I'll just wait for the speaker slip that I believe will be turned in right now.
Okay. Great.
And then 2, our public speaker, you can just go ahead and stand at the podium, make sure the light is on, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. I manage the single-family residence at 1225 Carpinteria Street, and in the past, I've spoken with a gentleman named Eric about this project. I know it was raised maybe 3-4 years ago, and the yellow permit sign, or whatever official name it's, has been kind of at the bottom of our driveway, so to speak, for quite a long time. And so we are very much willing to work with the city because we know how old this bridge is. This is family property that has been, over 70 years. And so I would just like to request to be placed on any type of notification list or whatnot, just so we can be on the same page about things. We're very willing to cooperate what needs to be done because we think it's a huge improvement for the neighborhood. But at the same time, just to kind of know everything from, start dates and what to expect so we can let our neighbors and our residents know. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any concerns you want to raise about aesthetics or anything about the bridge design in general? That's our scope of review.
Okay. No, actually, I am familiar with the bridge that the gentleman was referring to on Quinientos. It's beautiful. It's right around the corner from where we are, and if it's anything like that, we are wholeheartedly welcoming it. I don't think design-wise, it's not a concern, but just kind of feedback is our driveway is very close to the current old railings, if you will. I don't know what you want to call those, the fencing. And so, again, just wanted to make sure that if we can partake in any type of process and be notified, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do we have anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, we can close public comment and go to questions from the board. Who would like to start?
Chair Moore, I have a couple of simple questions, clarifications, really. When you mention one of the materials as being fractured sandstone, is that actually fractured or pieces of actual sandstone, or is it some man-made material? What is this definition? How would you define fractured sandstone?
Yes, to my knowledge, it's fractured sandstone.
Is it really an earth-created sandstone, or is it a man-made sandstone?
That I would have to get back to you on.
don't
Actually,
know.
I can, if Board Black,
I would suggest that it is in fact real sandstone. It's just,
That's
it's been
where-
crushed.
yes.
I see, so it's reconstituted?
Yes.
In a ashlar manner?
Well,
That's
it's
what I
just, it's
thought.
just loose, it's almost like gravel, but probably larger pieces than gravel, but it's basically crushed. That's my understanding of it,
Okay.
based on what I've seen in the past.
The drawing gave me an idea that it was sort of a random ashlar assembly of pieces.
No, not to my knowledge.
To my knowledge, it's sandstone that has been crushed into angular
Re-
pieces.
Okay, not to belabor it. And when you talked about the circular on the guardrail, you really mean an arch, don't you? A portion of a circular, right?
Yes.
It's not a portal, right?
Yes, the top is a half circle. There were, at last meeting, there were multiple options, and one was like triangular, one was rectangular. This is a half circle.
So clarifications,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms.
I have
Anderson?
one question. Can you just point out the existing streetlight and the two new ones that you're proposing on the plan?
Yes. The existing streetlight is, I said it was on Kenyatta, it's actually on Soledad. It's right here, and it is the same style that we had proposed. On the other end, there is a streetlight mounted to a SCE pole, but that is not the same type. Our two lights that we're proposing are here and here. And that was done through a lighting study to make sure that the light was being cast on the street and the sidewalks for safety, but not to put light into the creek for environmental protection.
Okay, so you've done a photometric test
Yes.
on that? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chair Moore, there was discussion that there was a lot of existing sandstone, the possibility to reuse it as caps. Now, am I understand this crushed fractured is the material that will be used in the retaining walls by forming it up and doing a faux texture of that stone retaining wall, or I'm confused?
No, we're proposing to do a concrete form liner to make the concrete look like
Look like,
sandstone,
yeah.
and then color it to match a sandstone.
All right, and the material that's filling up that concrete form is this crushed?
No, it's concrete.
Okay, so where's
So
the
they-
fractured stone?
Let me go back
Is it
to
a cap?
It's in the parkway, is it not?
The fractured sandstone is 3/8 of an inch. That goes in the parkway.
This is like gravel.
Oh,
That's this gravel material that will go in the parkway between the curb
okay.
and the sidewalk.
so then back again to, so back again to, are there any opportunities on the retaining wall where there is a top, and can we use the real sandstone that's already existing on site for more authenticity?
So that is something that we looked into. There were multiple issues with reusing the sandstone at the site. The sandstone on site is in very poor condition. And in our experience in the past, when we have tried to salvage the sandstone, when it's removed, it just busts apart. And so that's one of the reasons we're not doing it. The other reason is it's incredibly cost prohibitive to do that and to veneer the sandstone and then put it on there. It has been done on a city project before, and it more than tripled the cost to remove the bridge and lengthen the schedule, impacting the residents longer because it takes so long to carefully remove. But overall, so it's cost prohibitive, and the sandstone that's out there is in very poor condition.
Okay, so that's fine. And then I thought on this wrought iron or steel fencing that there was, your images show that the fencing turns at 90 degrees to, I thought, to the abatement, the.
abutment.
The abutment.
Yeah.
Is that always correct, or is there some along the property line, along parallel with?
So all four corners of the bridge have the retaining walls running parallel to the creek. Currently out there, the Sycamore Creek is a main flow channel, and up and downstream, both sides are confined by a fence, like a chain link fence that has rock behind it. And so we are tying our new walls into those. So that is why all four corners run parallel to the creek.
So you won't have any chain link, you will have this.
Yes.
Wrought iron.
Yes.
You won't have any chain link.
No, so the
I understand.
the wrought iron will be on top of the wall. The wall itself will look like this.
Yeah, okay.
And it will tie into the chain link that runs for hundreds of feet upstream and downstream.
Okay. And then one, with the, you're planting new trees, how close can you get, I'm just trying to get a rural feeling of a shaded rural road as it was so charming regardless of its function. Trying to get back to a more rural feel. How close are some of the more aggressive, tall street trees that might have an opportunity to shade and cast their shade over part of the street itself?
So we're proposing to plant the trees at no closer than 15 feet on center. And we are planting a total.
So the closest tree would be how close to this bridge?
The closest tree, the closest trees will be right next to the bridge, be just off the back of the sidewalk.
Oh,
And then
okay.
additional trees will be upstream and downstream.
All right, good. And then one last gasp for more rural. I noticed that one of the images was the Montecito Bridge, which had sandstone, at least a faux railing. It seems that would be a lot more rural. That's not in the language of possibilities?
So when the Montecito Street Bridge was constructed, the rules of what we were allowed to do on those pilasters for the bridge barriers were more relaxed. FHWA and Caltrans have come back and limited what we're allowed to do to those barriers, and they've given us the maximum depth of allowable changes to the bridge rail because they've been crash tested for safety. And this type of rail is no longer allowed to put that kind of sandstone on the barrier itself. It has to be on the abutments and the wing walls.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Questions?
I have a question. So if not now, when you come back for final, can you provide us with a detail of the wrought iron fencing?
Yes.
Assuming that the board has decided, yeah, that's the way to go. And
Yes.
with Finishes and what have you. And you don't really have an elevation of the bridge railing. I mean, I saw that sort of an angled,
Of the embankment?
rendered version of it, but it's not real clear to me. The little pilasters at every end, it looks like they have sort of a radius top?
Yes.
Is that the intent?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, if you switch to the, that elevation that shows the form liner and, yeah, that one. So then I'm looking down at the Gutierrez Street Bridge. I mean, to me, and this is partly a comment, I'm guessing too, the proportion of the caps just seems out of proportion to me. It's way too thick. And, I just wondered whether or not you guys are in a position to modify the size of that cap
Yes,
with the form liner.
Yes,
Is that part of the form liner as well? I know
no, that is separate. And so when we come back for final, we will have all those details rendered, but it will be a thin sandstone cap. So it will look like a thin piece of sandstone was placed on top of the wall.
Right.
Similar to what was done on Salina Street, the retaining walls along Salina Street.
I think that was the intent we would like.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Okay, no other questions, thanks.
Anyone else? Nope. The last time this project was here, there was significant public comment about traffic calming. And I know you addressed the city's response to that, but I'm not sure the residents are going to be satisfied. Well, the traffic department said, you don't need to do that, so you shouldn't have to do that. So what would be your response to those residents in the area as far as it's just not physically possible, it's not financially possible? What is the reasoning so they can be satisfied?
I think I will add those comments, so a few of them were also made to 500 Street Bridge specifically, not also this bridge, but there is a worry about it happening on this bridge, so we did look into specifically if that was needed for this bridge. I think it is a combination of, yes, cost, but also the analysis showed that it was not needed for this bridge.
Not needed because of the number of cars
Yes,
passing
traffic
over it?
counts,
Okay,
observations.
okay.
Chair Moore, could I have a follow-up question?
Yes.
So with the calculations of the block and the street width throughout the block, is there parking on each side of the street?
Yes.
So
So it opens up at this point.
it opens up, so you're allowed to park on the bridge as you are allowed to park along the curb on either side of the bridge?
So that's up to city traffic policy. Some areas of the city, it is allowed, like at the Anapamu Street Bridge, parking is allowed on the bridge. Other areas, it is signed for no parking.
But, so as you approach the bridge from either perpendicular streets, you can park up to the beginning of the bridge and after the end of the bridge to the next.
Yes,
There's some driveways right at the bridge.
yes.
But I'm trying to understand if the minimum width includes parked cars on either side of the bridge, why wouldn't a traffic bulb out or something in between those parked car widths be available to do on the bridge itself?
Well, so like Alexis was saying, the traffic counts and the speed don't warrant speed bumps or bulb outs at this point. And
I'm just trying to make it more, if there was a bulb out with low vegetation, as would be in the parkway, on those widths of street on the sides that would be usually available for parking, wouldn't that be a much more rural and green and happier solution?
Well, so there's not an opportunity for bulb outs near the bridge because there are 4 driveways on all corners within
Understand?
15, 20 feet.
How about on the bridge?
Well, on the bridge, we would not want to put a bulb out on the bridge because it would make planting very difficult.
Well, then,
The depth of if the bulb out was placed on the bridge, it would have to be approximately 8 inches deep, and there wouldn't be really any opportunity to put plantings in it.
could you entertain some kind of I don't know whether some kind of crushed, fractured rock between the sidewalk and the curb and the traffic to separate the pedestrians along the bridge to the traffic going by at a width that would be approximate the width of the parking lanes?
So that would narrow the width of by putting a bulb out on the bridge, it would narrow the traffic width on the bridge, and that would violate the code, the AASHTO roadway code.
So when we say traffic width, it includes the parked cars on either side?
Yes. And so if you, the code just says that the approach roadway, that the bridge width from, if you look in the typical section view, from curb line to curb line, it must match the approach roadway width. And so,
Regardless whether it's parked and
correct.
dead, and the sides are dead to thorough traffic up to the curb because of the parking availability, correct?
Correct. And there were 3 previous projects what the city had done where this same issue had come up, and the bridge was narrowed to try and to remove the parking off the bridge, and Caltrans came back and said that the city would lose their funding if they did that.
Well, let's don't do that. Okay, I think we beat that dead horse.
Can you at least paint wide white lines to indicate that some sort of narrowing of the roadway, at least drive surface, to
Yeah,
encourage people to slow down a little bit?
yeah. Currently,
try and
it's not striped,
satisfy
but we
the-
can, yes.
The neighborhood? Okay. Anything else before we move on? Okay, let's go to comments, please. So they're here for project design approval. So if you could focus your comments around that.
I can
please.
start.
Go ahead.
I think the black metal rail on the wings is an appropriate approach for that. And I would say that it's ready for PDA and come back with the elevations of the walls and the final details of the railing and the wall cap and things that were discussed today.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
I would
Whalen?
second all those comments with the understanding that the metal rail is always perpendicular to the roadway, right, in all cases. Thank you.
Okay. Vice
Yeah,
Chair Six?
yes, I'm similar, and so I think the only issues that we have is the height of the faux sandstone cap and the possibility of striping that area that is on either side of the bridge that is occupied by parked cars beyond the bridge.
Okay. Mr. Black, comments?
No other additional comments, just, well, one small thing. When you lay out I know, like on Mission Creek, for instance, there's the traditional construction process had larger stone modules at the bottom of the sandstone wall, if you will. And I was wondering whether or not you can, and I think it's been done other places with form liners, but if you could at least look into creating a module that's a larger one at the bottom and then it progressively gets smaller, because that's traditionally the way the masonry work was done in those days. And then along with the proper thickness for the cap itself, just something to consider. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Okay. Anything to add, Mr. Newman?
No additional comments. I agree with the previous and feel it's ready for PDA.
Yes.
Okay. I would agree. In my comment, I think I made it clear that if you're able to add some striping on the bridge to help slow people down, that would be great. Who would like to make a motion?
So I'll make a motion for indefinite continuance with project design approval, and with the following comments that the faux sandstone wall should have appropriate dimensions to the cap being not more than 5 inches high, and a graduation of increased size of the faux sandstone blocks on the lower, from the lowest to the highest, the largest being the lowest, and that some kind of striping along each side of the roadway on the bridge to delineate, what are we doing? We're trying to separate some kind of striping to delineate separation between through traffic and the pedestrians on the bridge for the width of the parking beyond the bridge.
Can you include that the metal railing was preferred?
Yes, and that the metal railing is preferred, and look forward to the details of that.
Also, if I might add, I think the consensus is to go with not to have a tint in the concrete and the rail, but to have the plain gray, which is basically traditional in Santa Barbara.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll read that in that the concrete shall be natural gray.
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion?
Chair Moore, we need the project compatibility findings, and also will this come back to full board or consent?
Full board?
It's up to you.
I think we could go to consent. So that the project is compatible because of the following. It is consistent with the guidelines of the locality within it's located. Two, it's compatible with the architectural character of the city and the neighborhood where it is located. There are three, size, mass, bulk, height, and scale are not applicable to this non-structure. Well, this not applicable to this particular structure. There are no adjacent landmarks or historic resources in the area to be affected. There are no public views of the ocean or mountains that is affected. And given the extensive reforesting of the creek up and down the bridge, the landscaping is adequate.
Okay, I think we can take our vote.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I'll take a roll call vote. Chair Moore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Six?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Noon?
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time here.
And then staff would just like to announce that there is a 10-day appeal period following project design approval. And there's instructions up on the screen if you wish to make an appeal.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are moving on to item number 2. This is 335 South Milpas Street. And this is a one-time pre-application consultation review. This is a proposal to demolish the 4 existing one-story commercial buildings totaling approximately 17,754 square feet and construct a new 99 residential unit 4-story mixed-use building using state density bonus law. Total project square footage is approximately 148,500 square feet, including approximately 6,000 square feet of commercial space, which fronts South Milpas Street at the ground floor, and approximately 38,140 square foot parking garage containing 122 parking spaces, an additional 5 uncovered surface parking spaces. Average unit size is approximately 818 square feet. Planning Commission will consider findings to allow the building to exceed the height limit of 45 feet. The project will require a staff hearing officer review of a coastal development permit. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. The project will require compliance with the project compatibility guidelines and the urban design guidelines. And before we jump into it,
Yeah, thanks, Chair Moore. I have to abstain for a conflict. I did want to announce for the following 2 presentations as well. Please.
okay, thank you. And I imagine we have a planner presentation before we jump in.
Yes. Hi, Chair Moore. Good afternoon, board members. I'm Tony Bauman. I'm the planner assigned to this project. And I just wanted to give a little context to today's hearing. It's sort of a typical one-time pre-application concept review by the ABR, but it's also a review that's required procedurally because the project requests an exception to the height limitations. So that'll go to the Planning Commission for their considerations of findings to allow the project to exceed 45 feet in height. And part of that procedure is a requirement for a concept design review by the ABR so that the Planning Commission can consider the ABR's comments. Just to give you some idea of what the Planning Commission findings are that they'll be looking at is, well, the project by definition being a rental housing project is a community benefit housing project, so it's the type of project that's allowed to request the height exception. And then the Planning Commission would consider that the project, there's a demonstrated need for the height. Architecture and design, it says the project, the finding says the project will be exemplary in its design. They would look at livability and sensitivity to context, meaning it fits in with the neighborhood, typical compatibility, sort of. Also looked at some of the applicable design guidelines and the ABR's guidelines, the general, or just the Part 1 architectural design guidelines. I did want to mention one. It's in Section 2. It's Guideline 1.2.1 called Building Design Compatibility and Consistency. And it says, buildings shall demonstrate compatibility in materials and consistency in style throughout exterior elevations. The reason I mention that, you'll see the building is designed with sort of Spanish style on the southwest. There's not much of a north elevation. It's almost a triangular building, but then the north side's sort of an industrial-inspired building. It's not necessarily consistent in style, but the architect has done that intentionally and with consideration to try to make it fit within its context, the way it faces those two sides. So I just wanted to mention there is a design guideline related to that. Other than that, I would say consider, I'm not going to go through them, but Section 3 of the ABR guidelines are the infill design guidelines that I think you're familiar with, and they're all certainly applicable to this project. It's a I think you mentioned it's a density bonus project, so it's got a 50% additional density. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'm just here for questions. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, Mr. Bowman, we are restricted to reduce housing that would be available on sites because of our state mandates and so forth. How does this project fit in with those mandates, and do we have potential wiggle room to say, because of whatever reason, that significant massing needs to be reduced and therefore look at reducing the number of housing units?
I think you're right to raise the question because we do deter the design review boards from talking about the number of dwelling units. So you really shouldn't get into the number of units proposed if they're allowed to propose a certain number. That's what they're allowed, and we don't want to reduce number of housing units anyway. But
so we could say size of those units.
Size, height, whatever. However, you can get that to your satisfaction without reducing the number of units, plate heights, or roof design, or anything like that related to height, or
so they have
the design of the massing. You know, the architectural design hopefully can go a long way to mitigate that if it's a good design.
Mm-hmm. So
but you shouldn't be telling them to eliminate units or take off a fourth floor or something like that.
So they have proposed a certain number of units, and that's what we are to work with.
That's the project.
Period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question. Mr. Bowman, is it in the ABR's purview to dictate number of parking spaces or traffic issues for a project?
Oh, same thing, basically. Those are not really within the context or scope of design review per se. The number of parking spaces, there again, normally you would look at a site plan to see where the parking is. It's not out in front of the building or whatever, the site planning. The parking design, site planning, all that is certainly in the purview of the ABR, but the number of spaces isn't.
Is it,
And traffic is out of the control of the ABR. That's not even on the project site.
so to be clear, the fact that a project might contribute to increased traffic or the possibility of impacts to parking within the area, is that within the ABR's purview?
No. Not to say that, I don't want to discount the public comments that we have, but there will be a coastal development permit, and there's some coastal findings that have to be made for a coastal development permit that could address things like that, but not ABR design review.
Okay, thank you. And I bring that up just to clarify what the ABR's scope of review is for the public, because we received a lot of public input for this project, and a large part of that had to do with number of parking spaces provided, the feeling that there was going to be an adverse impact to the surrounding neighborhood because of traffic, additional parking issues. Our board has no authority to tell an applicant that they need to provide more parking or that they should do things off the site to offset that. That level of review will come at a planning commission hearing, most likely, or a staff hearing officer commission review, and that will happen at a later date. So our board is concerned with the aesthetics, the mass, bulk, and scale of the project, what it looks like, does it fit within the design guidelines for the city in that area. So when the public is making their comments today, if you could, it would be most helpful for us if you could weigh in on how you feel about the look and the feel and the general massing layout of the proposed project. So we can't do anything about the parking or the traffic. So if we would appreciate it, just due to our time constraints here, if you could limit your comments to the aesthetics of the project.
Chair Moore, I thought of a couple
Yes.
more points. One of them is the planning commission will have to, the staff hearing officer is the review authority for this coastal development permit. And their coastal findings regarding scenic views or scenic visual resources that have to do with views, like, for example, views of the mountains from the park across from the project. So the ABR, when granting approval following the coastal development permit, you have similar project compatibility criteria considerations for views. So some feedback to the applicant today on that would be helpful too, in terms of the height, because it goes hand in hand with the building height that the Planning Commission will be considering. And also just to mention that the project is subject to the city's infill design guidelines, but when I look at the ones that are applicable, especially for this first concept review, they very much overlap, I think, with the infill design guidelines. So there's not much to be gained by pouring through the hefty infill design guidelines, because I think most of that is covered by the infill design guidelines. I mean, the urban design guidelines, I would just say you're covered if you look at the infill design guidelines today.
Just one more question on clarifying the public views. The public views are very clearly established where, in regards to the park and Cabrillo Boulevard, et cetera, but not the direct adjacent streets to this project. Vallarta and Amilpas, those are not public views?
Right. Not to say they're not to be considered, but they're not really public views. Cabrillo Boulevard would be, Chase Palm Park all along Cabrillo Boulevard looking across the park would be.
Right.
and looking back the other way toward Cabrillo Boulevard from wherever you could see it.
But there's no public views, quote unquote, of the mountains from the adjacent neighbor to the south.
Right.
Neighborhood to the south.
Well, the one thing that's clearly called out in the coastal land use plan as a public view is a park. So any of the parks.
Okay.
Maybe Dwight Murphy. I don't know if the project can be seen from there, but that would be another public view area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and for the public's benefit, how can they be put on a list to be contacted in the future for any other hearings?
So, thank you, Chair Moore. What's shown on screen is how to be listed as an interested party. So you can email that ABR secretary handle there, or submit a written request. We just provide your name, email, mailing address, and the project number that you want to be added to, and then we can add you as an interested party. So you can follow the project from here on out.
And that will, if you do that, that'll keep you informed about when this project is moving forward into these other hearings where some other matters might be of interest for you guys.
And just to note as well, I do believe that like these instructions are also found on the mailing request that was sent out to the neighbors as well. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, is there anything else or we're ready again? Okay. If the applicants could introduce themselves. This microphone is on. Great. Okay.
Hi, Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning. I'm a land use planner.
Brian Cornell.
Jeff Hornbuckle with the Cornell Collective.
Nicole Horn with CGMLA Landscape Architect.
Okay, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. So we went to Planning Commission back on June 15th with this, also for a concept review. They're the ones that ultimately have to sign off on the height exception, and we wanted to go there as the very first visit before a review board. So we got feedback from them, it's sort of higher level feedback. They don't get into the aesthetic weeds as much as we do here, but they did look at the overall size, bulk, scale, height. They do look at traffic and everything there, so we did talk about that. And I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to review that hearing, but they were generally supportive. There were some questions about things we'll be talking about here today, like the mix of architectural styles we have. Most of them supported that. Some of them felt really strongly otherwise. But we're really interested in your feedback on that today. One thing Mr. Bowman didn't cover is that this project submitted under SB 330, which I think you're becoming familiar with, certainly from some other projects I've had here, but others beyond that. But again, under SB 330, there's a very specific, narrow scope within which this board or any city board really can deny a housing project like this. And it's really subject to objective standards. And to deny a project like this, a board has to make a finding that it's got a specific identified impact to public health, safety, and welfare based on an adopted standard. So just wanted to remind everyone of that. And then that's really all I have to add. But I think in terms of Board Member Six's questions about reducing numbers of units and things like that, I think the SB 330 standards, I think they answer that question pretty simply. So I'm going to turn it over to our design team.
We started with the hammer.
He's a charmer.
Yeah. Speaking of charming, how do you like my gap in my tooth? This is the founder of Tri-County Produce. This is an important project because of the location and this building. John Dixon, who's not here, is our client, along with Chris Parker and Austin Herlihy, who are back there in the audience. But, you know, this is an important community use, obviously, and so we want to be sure that it continues to be. And that's been a foundation of our design. So Jeff, let's go through this together. this is exactly the presentation, pretty much, we showed the Planning Commission, by the way, so you'll get a sense. So here's the property boundary. You can see it outlined here. We are, how many acres? Close to an acre? 2.4. Thank you. 2.4 acres. This kind of gives you a context of what is around us. And just basically the views, go ahead through these quickly, Jeff. So this is kind of a, outline of the neighborhood, the transit corridors, what's industrial and commercial, what's residential, and then obviously what is open space and park. So we've got mountain views to the north and coastal views to the south. So these are the existing, this is the existing neighborhood and the existing building. Some more of those neighborhood shots as well as freeway views of the site. It's kind of hard to see the site from the freeway when you're driving southbound. It's almost impossible from the north, but from the south you kind of have to turn your head quickly as the Milpas on-ramp is merging with the freeway. Just some inspiration images. We think that this building really does, in terms of the way it presents itself to the Cabrillo side of things, it should be Spanish. It's obviously surrounded with a lot of Spanish architecture. Next slide. But we've also looked at the industrial side of this and the railroad tracks. Next slide. I think we just provided some inspiration images of kind of thinking about buildings that would have traditionally been along railroad tracks, which is what we are here. So turning the site a little bit just for orientation, let's start with the first floor. So we have attempted to maximize the parking spaces. Obviously, as was mentioned, this is a state bonus density, 50% bonus density above the 66 base densities allowed for the site. So we have the allowing for the continuation of Tri-County Produce, and it's about the same square footage, by the way, of what Tri-County Produce is today. And then, of course, the residential lobby we've located off Calle Puerto Vallarta. We originally started, by the way, with an entrance, a vehicular entrance off of Milpas. But we basically were told from staff that they couldn't support that due to its proximity to the queuing that would be necessary for the railroad tracks. We think that's unfortunate because it would alleviate a lot of the neighbor concerns about all the traffic coming off Puerto Vallarta, but that's the reason why we don't have an entrance off of Milpas. Next slide. So we're going to talk about the landscape plan as we go into this, and then we'll come back. So go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm going to talk about landscape real quick. So we've got a corner plaza here, and that's a commercial space intended to be complementary to the grocery use. So you could bring whatever you purchase here outdoors, eat it. We've got permeable pavers proposed in that plaza space and also at the garage entrances that you see here. All of our stormwater is being filtered up here along the Milpas Street frontage, and this is sort of the low point of the site. And we've got a number of trees proposed. We're planting 35 total, both on the ground floor and on the upper level. And we've got a primarily Mediterranean plant palette proposed, and also plants that would be compatible with a marine environment. We have some saltwater intrusion here on the ground. Next slide, please. On the podium level, which both Brian and Jeff can talk about more, we've proposed this sort of organic flowing shape to provide some softening and some buffer with these outdoor patios and this sort of rectilinear architectural geometry. You can see some reference images here. We've got a communal table proposed and a little trellis that would go over that. And again, trying to reference the grocery store, and you might bring something up here, and we're trying to emphasize and engage an outdoor lifestyle up here on the podium. We've got a raised planter in the middle. I'm calling that the olive. It's kind of olive in shape, and we've got a heritage olive proposed that would be a large box tree something like 60 inches. And we depressed the slab here so that we can fit that tree in. And then we've just kind of got these little nooks for more passive opportunities. So we've got a range of both active and passive recreation. We're showing some sort of gameplay here, like cornhole or something for the residents.
So this area, this open space is about 5,300 square feet, just to give you a sense of the area. So it's a good amount of space. And I think this also sort of shows you the relationships that we're thinking about this building, where we have the buildings rational to Calle Puerto Vallarta and to Milpas, and then we have the portion of the building that's along the railroad tracks. And so that's really architecturally where we thought about splitting this building in a sensible way. So let's keep going through looking at the architecture, just so you can understand the unit types. They're fairly simple. We've got studio 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So this is the layout. I think these really truly are workforce units. As you heard, the average unit density is, just under, I think it's 820 square feet. Next. So then as we continue on up, you can see we have some common spaces that are in the middle of the building. But again, you can really begin to see the logic of this stretch of building that runs along the railroad tracks, and then the buildings that are rational to the street. Because we understand the critical nature of the massing of this building and the view corridors, we have stepped the 4th floor back on the Cabrillo side significantly. And I think you'll see the effect of that when you look at the renderings. So maybe, Jeff, we should maybe move forward to the renderings. Oh, we are at the renderings, aren't we? Thank you. Yeah. So this is really the prominent public view, if you will, across the park. And then that's the building superimposed on that view. Next slide is closer, obviously off Calle Puerto Vallarta. That is the building mass, but I think it does show how important it is for that 4th floor to be stepped back from these street frontages. Next view is from the sidewalk. Looking back, we do obviously lose the foothills, but still see mountains, as you can see. And again, predominantly a 3-story mass. And then along the railroad tracks is where we change the theme of this to begin to pursue something that is more along the lines of the tradition of a railroad-oriented building. So these are a couple of other views. We're thinking of combining a plaster concrete kind of finish with a steel corten type of a finish. And so here's where those architectural styles kind of merge. You saw the one side on Milpas, and then on the other side along Calle Puerto Vallarta. Then along the freeway, again, when you turn your head as you're going southbound, you will be able to see the building from that vantage point. And then from the northbound, it really is pretty blocked by the trees that are there. There are significant trees, as you can see here, along the right-of-way. So we've got the elevations to look at, if you want us to go to those. Jeff, did we want to add anything? Obviously, this is an important housing project. It's providing a lot of units. We understand that it is large. I think the important thing is that we're preserving Tri-County produce. I think that we see this as an opportunity for employee or housing in this neighborhood, not only for the hotels, but also for Tri-County produce. And happy to answer questions.
I think it'd be a good idea for you to go to the elevations and address the height and floor to floor, that kind of information.
Right now, we are proposing, I think that we have 13-foot floor to floor at the first floor. Now we have 14-foot floor to floor at the first floor, which is important really for the retail portion of the project, that Tri-County produce. So this is the west elevation along Milpas. And then 10 or 11 feet floor to floor for the remaining building, which will allow for 9.5-foot ceilings. We think that that ceiling height is really minimum for this size of unit, and that is important. So along the Calle, we can look at the Calle Puerto Vallarta elevation. So what we've also incorporated here are green screens along the parking area. So that's going to provide for green along those facades, but also allow for ventilation into the parking area, which pretty much, as you saw, encompasses the entire first floor. We also are utilizing that strategy along the railroad tracks. So these openings will all be screened, and although Nicole's plan didn't show that, we've left enough room to be able to plant along the railroad right-of-way to allow planting along there. But, you know, this notion, this architectural notion really is the feeling that this is maybe a converted warehouse, but, you know, that it has large north-facing sort of artist studio loft type spaces in this direction. So it is a little bit of an anomaly that we're sort of mixing these styles, but to be honest, as we looked at this and conceived making it one Spanish colonial revival kind of building, we became concerned that it was almost too much of that, especially along the railroad, and that this would allow for a nice break of that vernacular. And handled properly, it is also, you know, obviously reflects itself in the plan of the structure.
Okay.
Keep asking.
Right on time. 10 seconds. Okay, with that, we can open public comment, please.
Thank you, Chair Moore. To anyone in the audience, if you'd like to fill out a speaker slip over on the side, and please turn it in to me. I do already have a few speaker slips. So first up, we'll have Sheila Lodge, followed by Markina Gregan. And Ms. Lodge has provided some handouts that I'll go ahead and distribute real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Architectural Board of Review. I am Sheila Lodge, speaking as an individual. In the late 1980s, the boundaries of El Pueblo Viejo were changed. 2 districts were included, one for the Mission and the area around it. The second district was created for downtown, and it was extended along all of Cabrillo, both sides of Cabrillo, and to both sides of West Cabrillo, between Chapala and the freeway, both sides of Castillo, State, and Garden, between the freeway and the waterfront. This was to let people know that when they got here, they were in Santa Barbara. It was Santa Barbara style architecture. Unfortunately, although Milpas is also an entrance to the waterfront from the freeway, it was not included. The end result is that the west side of Milpas is in EPV because the property fronts on Cabrillo, and it goes all the way back to the railroad tracks. Mr. Canales proposed an appropriate design for most of the Milpas frontage, but the remainder is an industrial design that, except for one building that I know of, has no place in Santa Barbara's architectural history or its reputation. This is a huge building. I just found out this morning from Mr. Kernal that it is 380 feet long on the railroad side, or 84% of a standard 450-foot city block. 2 different styles to break it up is a good idea. Industrializing Santa Barbara's architecture is not. All guidebooks to Santa Barbara mention its Mediterranean architecture as one of the appeals of this city, as does every article ever written about it. This doesn't mean that every building has to be white stucco with a red tile roof. It does mean, as David Gebhardt, from whom this room was named, an architectural historian, As he used to say, buildings here should let you know that you are in Santa Barbara. This is an entrance to Santa Barbara that should reflect that. And I've provided with you some possible examples. It's a huge building at an entrance to Santa Barbara's waterfront. Buildings here should have the grace, elegance, and timeless quality that is established as Santa Barbara's tradition. Please help assure that this one does too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Marquina, followed by John Bianchi.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak.
If you could speak into the.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm a resident and on Orilla del Mar, which is adjacent to Puerto Vallarta, and we cross with Milpas. I think that that's a commendable table front here of professionals that I was speaking with, and of course the board. The coastal view from the park, I think it's a little distorted in their photos because they take the photos all the way back from the back. This is a massive building, as the lady spoke before. Do they have to be 9.5 foot interior ceilings? Is that necessary? I don't know if that's your scope. It seems that just elevates the mass of the structure. If you look at it from Puerto Vallarta, they state that they moved it back, but why couldn't the tallest part, or maybe it is, it's difficult for me to notice in the renderings, but Puerto Vallarta is a major thoroughfare. That's a destination to the zoo, as well as to the beach, as well as to all the hotel parking around there. Is that vertical lift 60 feet? Is that what we're talking about here? And is that the look that we're looking for with the commercial and the, quote, Santa Barbara Mediterranean? I don't know. I'm not an architect. I'm just a taxpayer. I'm a resident. And I'm a member of an HOA board that sees an enormous structure, And the guidance that you folks can give us as residents is much appreciated. And please take a firm look at this. You don't dwell on parking, but 120 parking spots, regardless of the state bill, Senate bill, is not enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have John Bianchi, followed by Tim Werner.
Hi, my name is John Bianchi. I appreciate the layout of what the purpose of the board here today was. I was coming here solely with the purpose of talking about the parking, the inadequate parking, the congestion in the area. So that's all I had to say about it. Everything else you guys put up there, on paper, on the screen, it looks nice. But like I said, I was here just to talk about parking. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Tim Werner, please.
And who do we have following Mr. Warner?
That is the end of my
Okay.
speaker slips, unless there's anyone else in the audience who wants to fill one out.
Need to get a speaker slip.
If anyone else would like to speak, please fill out a speaker slip, and then we can go ahead and add you to the list.
My name's Tim Warner. I'm a property owner right across the street. I'm really in favor of the development, but not at all how it's presented. The presentation photos were taken so far back, it's a distortion on how large this building is going to be. It's an albatross. The egress coming out onto Calle Puerto Vallarta, the one right next to the stoplight, will be unusable. I don't know. Public safety, there's not a setback. You won't be able to see pedestrians on the sidewalk. Needs another egress to have hundreds and hundreds of trips a day using the facilities there. The landscaping is under what it needs to be. The city re-landscaped that area about 4 years ago, and Tri-County let it all die because they didn't maintain it. They're going to do the same in the future. Project has 0 bike parking. It should have hundreds of bike parking spaces since there's affordable units and the beach life. There's 1 elevator for 99 units. Good luck with that. The bonus density, if you take away the railway easement, which should not be used for state or bonus density, knocks the units back to 55 units, which could get you to a 2- and 3-story building, which would fit the neighborhood. The neighborhood has, I think it's 6 3-story buildings within a square mile. There's no 4-story buildings, period. The setbacks are 0, need to be changed for public safety for egresses. And I don't know if they've done a study on the Native American village they should be required to do a digging as I did when I was building my place 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
This project, as currently designed, is fool's gold. We need housing in this community, but not by bastardizing a neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we did receive one more speaker slip for, and apologies if I mispronounced this, Ute Sockner.
Hi. Thank you. Nice to see you all. I've been here once before with interesting results. I'm a resident on Orilla del Mar, like the gentleman. I've been here for 33 years, so I'm very interested in what's going on around me. I'm not going to put my hand like an ostrich away, and I would like to say that I'm a bit shocked and alarmed because I had just received the information about the building going up less than a week ago. And so this is totally new to me. So I'm hoping to get as much information as possible today. I am very concerned about congestion and things, and I know you're mostly interested today in aesthetics, which I would be also, being an artist. And so far, I am not really very pleased at what I'm seeing. We live close to the freeway and the railroad tracks. We know our neighborhood well. We know who frequents it. We know how many cars come and go, as the gentleman said, to go to the beach or the zoo or the hotels. And it is getting more and more congested by the second as we live here. Notwithstanding the need for urgent housing in this city, I understand the dilemmas there. I would have moved the building to a totally different neighborhood. I do not think it belongs where you are planning to put it. If this is a done deal, then it's futile for me to keep speaking, but I am hoping to at least raise some awareness and concerns about the people who have to reside there and deal with even more traffic and more congestion and possibly more of everything. Even coming over here today, I had to go past Puerto Vallarta and past the Tri-County to get here. And again, I thought it is already so dangerous just to even drive here. And I think that all I can say is, what were you thinking? Can't you find another neighborhood where there is more space, more open space, where it's not going to be right in our backyard?
Okay,
you know,
that
as the
is
saying goes.
that is your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do not have any more in-person speaker slips, so I'll go ahead and turn to virtual public comment. If anyone joining via Zoom would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and we did receive written correspondence from David Thomas, Eric Panditz, Ernest Solomon, Garrett Miller, Paulina Kahn, Tim Werner, Ray Faz, Nick and Caroline Howell, and John Bianchi, which was distributed to the board prior to the meeting. Back to you.
Okay, with that, we're going to close public comment and go to questions from the board. Who would like to start? Mr. Black, you want to start at this end?
I don't have any questions right this moment.
Okay. Vice Chair Six, why don't you start us off?
Yes, thank you. Will Tri-County Produce always be the ground floor tenant?
Oh, I don't think I could say always, but John Dixon, who owns Tri-County Produce, intends on keeping the business going. Obviously, there'll be a transition period during construction, but owns the property
Owns the
and
property, okay.
intends to keep it going.
And then, you don't have any flood level issues here? Or
No.
no flood issues? So, part of the public, one individual said that there was a railroad right-of-way type of use or something that you're taking
Well,
advantage of?
Well, the entire parcel includes the railroad right-of-way, so you can see that here. And so we are able to account for that in determining our base density. But it obviously is not part of the project design because we can't build on that. So that is the basis of the base density, the 66 units.
I get it, okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
That's it, okay. Mr. Whalen?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore. Perhaps I should start with a couple for Mr. Baumann. As I read the drawings, the height requested is 51 feet, 10 inches, let's call it 52 feet. That excludes the elevator override.
That's right, the elevator is considered to be a tower exempt from the building height.
Yeah.
Or the measurement of
So-
maximum building height.
So we won't talk about that, but could you tell us what the height comments from the Planning Commission were? You mentioned that in your introduction.
Mr. Gorin reminded me, I didn't mention the previous Planning Commission hearing. I'll see if I can find the minutes for you.
That would be helpful. A couple of questions for the landscape. Could you explain exactly what a green screen is, what it consists of, both manufactured and grown?
Thank you. Yes, that's a detail I don't know that we've fully worked out yet, but there are options. So it can be something that is literally a screen that's applied to the building or applied, with some sort of support on the building, and then we grow vines on top of that. That, I think, is the most basic definition. And there are a number of products. So it could be, a green colored screen. It could be, here's some more images of that. Or it could be a Corten like that. So I don't know that we've fully detailed it yet. There are some options if you have specific comments.
That photograph is very helpful. That's sort of what existed in my mind because it is not a ventilated garage, mechanically ventilated, right? So you're relying on this green screen to meet that requirement. Very good. And then another landscape, can you give us any examples of podium plantings for trees that are 60-inch boxes? It seems like a very daring move. Has that been done locally at all? Are there any examples that you can think of? If not, go farther afield.
Well, I know that we did a project next to the high school at the end of Rinconada that actually had that size olive trees that were planted in the courtyard space.
And that's a podium.
That's a podium, yeah.
Mhm. And they're thriving, I take it?
They are. yeah.
Okay.
Now, in that case, we did put them in 48-inch high planters, so they kind of became privacy walls. In this case, we are actually depressing a portion, basically.
Into that 14-foot high.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it. Let's see. And then perhaps you could show us an interior elevation of the industrial wing. My specific question is, does that industrial ethic permeate to the courtyard?
Yeah, I will be honest, we haven't fully investigated that, but I think it needs to. I think, again, we need that clear definition of wings, I think, to define the architecture.
Okay, that's helpful. Those are all my questions, Chair Moore.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. Can we go back to the first floor plan? And could you point out bike parking locations and then give us a rundown on a circulation, how someone from the residential unit would park and how they would get up to their space? And
Sure. So short-term visitor parking is located here off of Milpa Street, adjacent to the entrance and the patio space. Whoops, sorry. Residential long-term biking, if I can get there, is located in the bike parking room off of the lobby. So, right now we're showing a entrance off of the lobby, but, we've talked about maybe having an additional entrance off of the street just for ease of getting bikes in and out. I'm sorry, what was the third question?
And then could you walk us through just like a typical day of a resident that would live there and how they would circulate to their unit up above?
Sure. So we've got a staircase up at this corner of the project, and an elevator and a staircase off of the residential lobby in this location. So that would take them up to the floors above, if I can go the right way. So here's those on the floors above. So basically at each end, and they would, circulate through. And I will note that we've specifically created a break in the massing here just to, help with the circulation so that, someone, that lives here doesn't have to go all the way around to access the courtyard.
Is this the second floor?
This is the second floor
Okay.
podium level, that's correct.
So that the circulation along that railroad side, those are exterior exit balconies that face into the courtyard, and then obviously the other units are interior courtyard access, interior corridor accessed. The units
Yes,
along Calle
okay.
Puerto Vallarta and Milpas.
Okay.
There's also employee bike parking for the grocery store on the ground floor, protected long-term parking.
Okay. So on the second and third floors, there's no circulation along Milpas or exterior, so it's all inside the courtyard, right, to your units?
Yeah, all of those.
Those are the entrance,
There are a number of balconies. Obviously, these units, all of these units actually have incredible view opportunities. The ones along the north, along the railroad tracks, we obviously have acoustic issues there, so there really are very few balconies facing in that direction. We have done an acoustic analysis, by the way, or a noise study relative to those units. But then the units that are on the ocean side, both streets, we have tried to provide as many exterior decks for those units as possible as private outdoor living space.
And was there any consideration to, instead of doing a courtyard style, taking that open space and pushing it towards the street side, the Milpas and the corner, the other street?
No.
Okay. Just curious. Thank
Sorry.
you. Calle
This is
Puerto
the public time is over. We're in discussions here.
I believe those are all my questions for now.
Okay, Vice Chair Six.
Yeah, I found my question, sorry. It's kind of minute, but it will go into one of my comments. I noticed on the renderings that the two walls that create the niche in the very corner above the canopy to the market are very big wall to floor to ceiling windows, and on the plans those are bed walls and toilets and so forth. Is Is that just a issue, just,
No toilets. They may show as a bed wall, but that's just a function of the group that was, yeah, so that just needs to move to the other wall.
We're not going to do, we would not do away with the windows, we would relocate the bed. I think that was probably, again, these plans are probably typical plans that we insert.
So, for example, this bed would just flip to this wall is the bed wall, and likewise.
okay. So,
There's no bathrooms that have those openings.
okay, can you go through where exactly you're asking for your over the height of the ordinance? In what portions of the building or where?
Portions that are along Milpas and Calle Puerto Vallarta are just over 40 feet. For the most part, you can see that. And then we do have a portion along Calle Puerto Vallarta that is stepped back, that extends up to that 50-plus foot elevation. So,
So those are both
so
over.
those portions are over. Obviously, the fourth floor, all of the, I should really clarify, all of the fourth floor is over the 45 feet.
Okay. And then this elevation, that elevation here, I'm concerned about the experience along Vallarta. There are several unadorned, I understand the green screen perfectly, but there seems to be 5 other unadorned openings into the parking lot. Yeah, right there. Are those just...
So those would either be green screens, or the way we've shown them now is we're contemplating as some sort of decorative iron screen.
Okay, so they are not...
They're not just blank,
blank
openings
openings,
or completely, obviously we have security to
Yes.
be concerned with, but those would be some sort of like layered.
And those are required for your ventilation.
Exactly.
And what isn't showing, obviously, is the street tree palette that's along Calle Puerto Vallarta.
Yes, I understand. Could you go through the, with the depth of your planting areas along the 2 streets? Are there more depth available because of parkways, or are we just down to minimum everywhere? Could you walk those through?
So you want to know the setback dimensions? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah,
or
what do we have in the way of depth, overall depth, including parkway, or not including parkway, of landscape availability?
When you say depth, you're talking about the dimension from the property line to the face of the building? So,
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
Yeah, I mean, it varies.
I think it does on my site plan.
So if we could just walk through that just for our understanding. Would a landscape work
So
better?
starting on Calle Puerto Vallarta, I mean, obviously at the corner, we've got significant setbacks. This is a 3-foot.
Is that a covered courtyard? It looked like in
It has that.
eyebrow,
Yeah, the marquee
Canopy,
sort of
yeah.
element over it.
all over it?
Yeah, well, yes, currently
The dotted line is,
is the
Correct.
canopy, yes.
okay. Mhm.
So in terms of the depth, 3 feet at this location, 18 inches at this pop-out for the garage entrance, back to 3 feet, then we're essentially 5 feet. We step back further at the lobby to 8 feet, then we're 3 feet here. Obviously, this triangular shape varies. Again, here varies. And then on the Milpas frontage, there already was the Milpas street widening that happened several years ago. So that's what this 8-foot dimension is representing. So this portion.
So
of-
that was mandated?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that work has already been done, yeah.
Ah, okay.
I can flip to the site photo if you want to see that. So, we're basically 8 feet back from that for the majority of the commercial space. Then we're an additional 2 feet, additional 3'10", and then an additional 8.5 feet at this location.
Plus, right there, plus the 8 feet.
Plus 8 feet, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, if we go to the last floor, the fourth floor, is there any reason, obviously aesthetically, mask-wise, you want to diminish the very ends of this row along the railroad, but is there any reason that one unit or two could be added and shifted from the sensitive Vallarta Street over to the less sensitive railroad? So where
You're referring to these 3 units here?
yeah, that's what I'm concerned about those, and not so concerned about the massing along along the railroad. Is there a way to take at least 2 of those 3 and move them over to the railroad side?
And what is I'm just wondering what's the.
To get the mass down from the
Okay.
neighborhood and from that street. It's a significant impact on the neighborhood, and one of the important things that we have left in our palette is context to the neighborhood, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's nothing that prevents us. The reason that we did, maintain these units here and peel them back from the edges is to provide view, those view corridors to the mountains. So as soon as you start putting.
From where?
From different locations around the site, right? So as soon as you start putting units back here, it prevents views through.
So in your mind, you've obviously you've balanced the sensitivities to both of those concerns.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was important to, step back that 4-story portion along the railroad tracks. And it was obviously also important to us that we break that so that it wasn't a continuous row of 4 stories along that massing. But I can't say, it's possible that if, to move those 3 units, if that was deemed more important than the carving away on the corners.
We actually did look at it. I mean, that's how we started, was without any units here. And, after studying different options, we felt that the better solution was to actually have, a 4th-story massing here to sort of, to create some variation in the massing. That it actually providing 4-story helped that elevation. So that was our process of how we ended
Maybe
up
go
what
to
we
that
did.
elevation real quick, Jeff.
So it's this is that location of those 3 units, which are they are set. I think it's important to note that they are set back from the face of the parking garage.
By how much?
It's a good question.
And we were struggling with, I mean, it is a big building, I fully acknowledge that, and we were ending up with this very long 3-story portion, and that did, at the end of the day, really seem to help to break up that mass.
I don't have a precise dimension, but I believe it's about 6 feet.
I get it, yeah. I think those are my remaining questions.
We knew he had more questions.
Okay. Anyone else with follow-up questions?
Excuse me, Chairman.
Before- Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go
I
ahead.
didn't know if you wanted me to respond to Board Member
Yes,
Whalen's
please.
questions about what the Planning Commission had to say about height. when we recorded, it was just an optional concept review at the Planning Commission at the request of the applicant. So the minutes recorded just each commissioner's individual comments, like a long paragraph of each of their comments. And I just looked through those, and there wasn't too much about height. They were, like Mr. Warren mentioned, they were more interested in the big picture land use issues. They were very interested in the affordability levels in the project, and is there a way to get more affordability in the project, that kind of thing. And we explained a procedure to them that the project would have this ABR concept review before they would consider the height. But I saw a couple of mentions of it. Commissioner Wiscombe commented that she felt that the views, the coastal view issue was satisfactorily addressed. And Commissioner Wardlow mentioned that she thought the high ceilings would be beneficial to the tenants. And Commissioner Bauke just mentioned that he supports the height. And I think somewhere in the conversation he mentioned he liked the way that that fourth story was set back from Milpas. But that's all I saw in their minutes pertaining to height.
Thank you, Mr. Baumann, for your endeavor there to track that down quickly. So a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
And I'm probably going to be able to answer this myself. If you'll give me the 2 inches, you're asking for 7 feet from 45 to 52. Now, briefly, your plate heights are 14, 9?
11, well, floor to floor, it's 11 feet, which gives us basically 9.5.
So I guess my follow-up question is there any way, without removing the fourth floor, reducing plate heights to come into 45-foot height level?
No.
And that's because?
You just can't.
You
can't
just
do it. I mean, you know.
Not even with 8 feet?
Yeah, I mean, we've done, and Ms. Lodge has pointed this out to us, we've done a building on Chapala that had that met the 45-foot height limit. And the only way we were able to do that is by making the upper units were townhomes, and we basically did then go to lower ceilings for those townhome units, and ended up squeezing the fourth floor of the townhome units to 8 feet.
Right. All right. I just wanted to put a fine point on that. Thank you.
Yes.
One more tag on to that question. The floor to floor on the fourth floor is also 11?
No, it's not. It is. I think that we allowed for 9-foot ceilings there. Let's see what one.
And a vaulted ceiling or something?
We have a 10-foot plate there. Looks like 36 to 46.
Because of the attic spaces and so forth, yeah, okay.
Okay, so while we're on that subject, so it's your feeling that a basic 9-foot plate from the second through fourth floors is not adequate for an apartment?
I would like to do more than 9 feet, but I'm not going to say that 9 feet is not an adequate height.
All right. On the ground floor, so in the garage, the parking garage, it's a flat podium, correct?
Correct, except for the indentation for the tree.
Okay. Did you study stepping that podium deck to try and mitigate some of that height?
We didn't, just because of the accessibility challenges associated with that. We could, I can tell you from our experience, we can't do less than probably 12.5 feet from floor to floor for that podium, just because of all the plumbing lines that are coming down into that area. So we might be able to, we certainly can study that possibility. It would be challenging, again, from accessibility, but, that is possible.
Okay, we've seen projects come through lately that have done that in order to try and mitigate their height. And with some creative parking layouts, they can isolate the accessible spaces to a degree where they can allow the ceiling and the remainder of the garage to be dropped. And then with some finessing of the plan, they're able to make it work.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just more worried about the accessibility at the unit levels than I am really at the garage level.
Yeah. But it is possible. Then did you study potentially a parking machine instead of just a flat garage field of spaces?
The owners are adamant that they do not want to put in parking lifts.
Okay.
Are you talking about the pit, the versions with pits or above grade lifts?
Parking stacker.
If we're
the-
above
the
grade,
many
obviously,
versions of those.
we need more height in the garage, so that's sort of counterintuitive.
Well, my point of that is that you can minimize the footprint of the garage and potentially bring other massing lower as a result.
But if a parking lift goes up, it's going to eliminate units on the next floor up, which would have to go somewhere else if we weren't going to lose units.
Correct. So those units could potentially go down.
But then the buildings, we just changed parking for units, and we have the same building.
You reduce well, anyway, this is the discussion. You're reducing the footprint of the garage, you could put units elsewhere. So I'm just trying to make sure that all options have been explored because as you say, this is a large building. There's a significant change proposed here. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on across the street on Puerto Vallarta? What are the uses and?
It's all residential, and I think we've got some photos along there. I think on the first set of photos you had, Jeff, you had some more photos. So that lower middle slide really kind of shows, is probably the best slide. Where the bottom left, you're looking, the bottom left, you're looking back towards Cabrillo, and the middle bottom, you're looking in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Have you looked at, another one of our concerns is privacy between neighbors. Obviously, this is across the street. Have you looked at what kind of in between these buildings, are we setting up issues of privacy conflicts with these existing windows and outdoor spaces there?
Well, you've got a right-of-way between them, so, but I confess we have not looked at the alignment of the windows with the windows across the street.
Okay. I was thinking more of the open spaces, the decks, et cetera, that are all facing the street there. Okay. And then we touched on it briefly, but in the roof plan, can you just give us a rough depiction of how much roof area is actually above the height limit?
Yeah, I think we can. So the mansard roofs that are along the streetscape there are all at 40 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So then the roofs beyond there are all at that 50-foot height.
But how much of that roof is it?
Those three hip roofs are all 4-story roofs.
This is flat roof, what's above, obviously this, sorry, thank you, this peaks up, and then the flat roof of the massing along the train tracks.
And the flat roof is, it's more in the presentation slide, but it is important for us to maximize the flat roof for photovoltaics. So all of that will be photovoltaic on the flat roof portion along the railroad tracks.
Okay, so everything with the exception of the mansard kind of roof on the front on the corner there is above the normal height limit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then obviously the corners are, those have eroded
Step
back, so
down
those are
there.
below, yeah.
Okay, any follow-up questions before we go to comments? Yes.
Yes. A question to Mr. Baumann. Obviously, one of our findings needs to be that public views are not affected. Did the Planning Commission discuss, it's obvious or apparent from the photos that public views of the mountains, at least on the mountainside of the park, are clipped a bit when you get closer to the corner of Vallarta and Milpas. But obviously, I guess from the center or from the outskirts closer to the ocean, they're not clipped. Did the Planning Commission ever get into that discussion whether public views pristine in all parks, or are there particular, I remember a chart showing exact points along Cabrillo in the parks where views were actually photographed. Did that ever come into discussion, and the fact that we're clipping some of the mountain views from extremes of the backside of the park?
Board Member 6, the Planning Commission didn't really get into a discussion of that. They'll probably think more about it when they make the height findings. It's a good question for the ABR today. I know the map that you're talking about, it was kind of ambiguous with regard to this site. It's in the coastal land use plan. There's a map that shows pluses for positive views and minuses for negative views, and it's like from different points along the coastline, there are like these like these cones of view, but those diagrams didn't really offer much benefit for this project site.
Commissioner Wiscombe addressed it specifically.
Yeah, she mentioned she didn't think the project would,
So if we,
or thought it could be found consistent with coastal policies, but
'cause if we
I
go
would
to
say
the-
it's got to be a case-by-case judgment
Yeah.
call. It's very hard to specify, and it depends on the vantage point. Like the further away you are here, you see more mountains. As you get closer,
And
you wouldn't
maybe-
see any mountain view at all if you're right in front of the building.
So with the next photographs, where the gardeners are, that one and that guy, here we are in the park, and we're, those public views are, not that I'm, saying this is a deal killer, but it's a concern. I wonder, well, thank you.
If I may just mention, what's important to me about this view is that the 3 stories is really doing the view blockage. You see a glimpse of the 4 stories here, but it really is the 3 stories, and obviously the closer you get, the more you are going to lose those views. So,
Yeah.
it is a kinetic kind of an experience.
Kinetic.
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 Moving, yes, right.
Mr. Hornbuckle, did you have some additional rendering views? Or are they in the plan set? I thought I'd seen some ones that you
They
haven't
were
shown.
in the presentation and in this plan set.
Closer view.
We had a couple of additional views along the railroad tracks. Is the only difference. We didn't have any new views.
That's a new.
Yeah, so those 3 views on the railroad tracks we did as additional views.
That upper right one was the one that I was remembering seeing. I'm sorry, upper left, where it shows you're closer to that intersection and you don't see any mountain views once you get that close.
Yeah, and again, you don't, with the exception of that 4 stories that we were talking about along Calle Puerto Vallarta, you really don't see that 4th floor.
Mm-hmm.
And that we felt was very important.
Okay, anything else before we go into comments?
Can I ask a couple quick question? Could you remind me what the designated street tree is for Milpas and Puerto Vallarta? As I remember, Milpas was Podocarpus.
Just gonna look at my notes here. Yeah, there's, on Puerto Vallarta, there isn't a designation on our block.
There was not.
No, so we're proposing the Colorateria, which you see in the renderings, because there's one there that's existing in good health.
Which one, Colorateria? Is that what you
Yes,
said?
yes. And then on Milpas, do you remember? The which one? Oh, the Melaleuca, which we have on the plans.
Which one? Which Melaleuca? Quinquenervia?
Quinquenervia.
And would those be in planters or in cutouts? I mean, because
Those are in the parkway.
there is a parkway.
Yeah, in
And
the
how wide
planter
is the parkway?
parkway.
Just, excuse me.
Pretty sure it's 6 foot.
Oh, you have a 6-foot park? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it looks big, 6 feet.
Well, I think the Melaleuca is going to go a long ways to sort of mitigating the massing.
5'4"
Just,
is the parkway
yeah,
there.
just given the size that they're able to attain. I mean, they're easy 40 feet. So anyway, I just wanted to remind myself. And then along the railroad tracks, there is an opportunity for planting other than the green screen, or what's the setback? It's just right up against the right-of-way?
Correct.
We provided a few feet is all, so it's really nothing more than what
Okay.
we could plant
I understand.
for that screen.
I'm sorry, in Puerto Vallarta, we do not have a designated tree, so we don't?
No, there is no designated tree, so we'll have to take that to
Oh, the
staff.
Colorateria you were
The
talking about.
Colorateria is what we're proposing, but there's no designation.
Got it, okay.
And there's one there now, if we'll scroll up just a little bit, Jeff, the one that is there now.
Right, it's on the corner.
well, Yeah, it's right there. It's basically right there.
And we're removing several others. There's a variety of different species that are just in poor health.
Colorateria has more of a spreading canopy as opposed to a more upright, which is probably where you want to go, but.
Yes, but we do have palm trees proposed on Puerto Vallarta on site
do.
within the property line to
Okay.
help compete with that massing.
Washingtonians?
Yes, Washingtonians.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, comment-wise? Yeah. So, I'll be brief. Well, like everyone else, I mean, the building is large, and it's in a lot of ways overwhelming, I think, particularly for those that are used to seeing a one-story building there. But from my perspective, just strictly on the aesthetic issues, I think architecturally, stylistically, I like the combination of the more Mediterranean approach on Milpas and Puerto Vallarta, and then juxtaposed with the industrial look along the railroad tracks. I like that because, one, I think if you were to, in fact, and I think you probably came to the same conclusion, when you make it all Mediterranean, it's just, I think that would be overwhelming. So I like the combination, and not that far away, we've got the Funk Zone, and we've got opportunities there. It's almost eclectic, but, the industrial look is not unknown in this city. And so I think that's a reasonable approach to take, and a successful one. That I like the way the massing has been on the elevations, has been articulated, and I just like the in and out, the variety of the massing, and like you've pointed out, the fourth floor, as you get closer to the building, becomes sort of a non-issue in my book. And at the same time, I think the building is okay relative to views of the mountains, as long as you're set back in the park and then over at Cabrillo. But so I think, given what we have before us, I think it's successful. And I'm sure there's lots of details that can be worked with, but I think the use of street trees on both sides are going to help bring down the massing as they mature. And so I think that's going to be a plus. And that's all I have for now.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chair Six.
Yeah, I generally like the massing and so forth. I think on two sides of the triangle, the mass spoken scale is, a building of this size is bearable, Milpas and the railroad. I'm very concerned about the context with the smaller neighborhood to the south, to the ocean side. And as I commented before, I think any effort to take the four-story massing, even though it's set back in some portions, to further reduce that, to bring it down to, to step it down to transition to that smaller neighborhood. I don't mind. I think there's one four-story on the very corner that I don't mind because it's not so wide. But the other fourth-story massing, I just, I would hope that you could find ways to move at least two of those, hopefully, units away from that. And not only that, make that whole, even though it isn't as playful as playful architecture, that maybe that whole, if it has to be three wide, maybe it's the whole roof is pitched to minimize that height there. I usually advocate for these schizophrenic buildings to reduce mass. Don't know if that's quite right, positive word, but I am concerned. Even though travel entering the city by train is indeed a gateway, and I like the industrial look, but I don't think it has to be celebrated in Core 10, and maybe it's, as the examples of Ms. Lodge provided, and maybe it's more bland and background. The shapes and the forms are okay because of the mass and the appropriate mass along the railroad, but I think if they could be quieter and not so much, stating industrial rather than very simplified or very simple white or off-white or whatever. It doesn't have to, there's certainly, I'm not suggesting the full mission tile stuff, but very simple forms, and have it go in the background so it doesn't vibrate as foreign to the architecture that we celebrate here in Santa Barbara. And the other thing is the reasons I asked on the question of the size of the windows above the canopy of the corner. I think that there's something very disappointing about the way that the commercial space is tucked under this contemporary flat roof. If certainly we can't do the icon of the gabled roof of the old market, but could you have some kind of architecture, canopy, facade, pilasters, other means of overhang that express, hey, this is a commercial space, and as long as the market is there, it could, express it as a market, a lot more than just tucking it under a contemporary eyebrow. But other than that, I think the massing is successful. And those concerns except for those concerns I've stated.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whalen?
I'm concerned about schizophrenic buildings, Mr. Six, or maybe it's only architects that are schizophrenic and reflected in their buildings. But nevertheless, I do agree with this premise to break the building up into smaller masses, and I would encourage you to keep doing that. I think it could be pushed a little farther. I would like to pick up on a point that Mr. Baumann brought up about its compatibility and consistency of style. This is where I think the proposed design doesn't necessarily comply or well, let me back up a bit. If we look at the super block of the area, which has the Santa Barbara Inn at one corner, perhaps overly exuberant, the Blue Sands Hotel, the Hilton Santa Barbara. This building is really going to complete that block. And that in and of itself, I would support the consistency of style. That while I initially thought this industrial ethic on the north of the railroad style was intriguing, I would dial that back, and that it should be consistent with the Santa Barbara style, because while it is the railroad, there really isn't an industrial history of that area. And as Mr. Six pointed out, the railroad, this is the first building that you see when you come into Santa Barbara. You go through a greenscape in Montecito. So this is really the introduction to the city, and I would like it better reflected in the Santa Barbara style. There's also a wonderful view of the site, southbound 101. If you take the North Milpas exit, there's a long, lingering view.
North Milpas entrance to the southbound freeway.
Well, it's the southbound 101. You would take the northbound Milpas exit. It J-hooks around to a long, lingering view of the site, and there again, it's the Santa Barbara impression that I would like to see, my own preference. I don't really find industrial examples, nor I would call it streamlined modern, as Mr. Six was pointing out at the canopy. This mix of, it looked like it was sort of bent around. I couldn't really tell, but it did seem inconsistent. And in general, to more closely align with Santa Barbara style, the window openings are in general too large, and they should be reduced so that there is more wall area, which reads more as Santa Barbara style. Let's see. I think those are all of my major points. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
Sure. I think as far as site planning, I think it was very thoughtful as locations of entrance. Unfortunate about the entrance not being able to go on Milpas. Otherwise, the location of the commercial space and the bike parking in the lobby all seems thoughtful. As far as architectural style and massing, I'm okay with the mixture of the Santa Barbara style with the industrial look. I think the most interesting view is the east view on Calle Puerto Vallarta, where the two come together. So I would actually encourage studying, somehow integrating the two styles, maybe throughout, instead of segregating them completely. And I would actually not include a lot of the mission tile. I think that you can make it more of a humble Santa Barbara style, similar to the examples that were handed to us, and marry that with the industrial style and create a great building. I think a triangular site is already difficult, and I think that there's some opportunity that can be explored to integrate the two, but maybe also open up the massing so that you can actually view through the building to the mountains. As far as the height, I am okay with the height, going over the height limit. I think you've started to look at pushing that fourth story back towards the railway, which is the right decision to get it away from the streets. I would also study bringing some of the open space closer to Milpas and to Puerto Vallarta. I just think there's a lot of opportunity to push the design on this site and actually create something that could be an example for the future of Santa Barbara. And those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Six, you're itching to say something else.
I'm coming across very schizophrenic in the pattern of my responses. But, you know, I think that recognizing, I don't think there needs to be this real brilliant contrast between the railroad side and the street sides, because the building is triangular. So when you're viewing it from these from these corners, your frontage is not at 90, but it's oblique. So, you know, you have that advantage to reduce the apparent massing of this building, which is to your advantage, and therefore not needing the as much contrast as you have. The other thing is in regards to public views from the park. I would suggest to really put that thing to enlighten that thing, and perhaps that issue, and put it to bed, is to have additional photos through the park, mid-park, or left of park and right of park, to, you know, just to see the extent of that view issue.
Okay, thank you. My own feelings are that I think the dichotomy that you're presenting here with the kind of the front and the back, I don't think, based on the views that I'm familiar with of the site, I don't think that we need to get away from the more traditional Santa Barbara style on the building as a whole, because as is suggested, the building is, because of the very nature of the site, the building is going to appear differently on both sides. And initially, when I saw the drawings, I thought, oh, well, that's an interesting approach. But I had assumed that there, on the backside along the railroad tracks, that there was going to be some healthy landscape screening as well to help soften that view. But the fact that it's right at the railroad easement and there is no landscape buffer, I think you need to do some more work to consider the views of this building as seen from the freeway, from the off-ramp, and from the other vantage points, and even the train, as has been indicated. Perhaps you could get away with inserting one or two building blocks that are less traditional, maybe more industrial, as a nod to the previous kind of buildings that were on the site. But I think just a whole row of more industrial appearance is not appropriate for this site. The one thing we really struggle with on projects like this is making the project compatibility findings, and how do we find that this is compatible with the neighborhood in general? And knowing that the pattern of development in the neighborhood is, has been in place for a long time, and this is a brand new project. So how can we bridge that gap between what's old and proposed? And I think for the board to be able to do that, they have to see that the applicant has done everything they can to reduce the apparent massing, the height of the project. So I feel that there's definitely some height that can be taken out of this project. I think as Vice Chair Six indicated, there's some manipulating that could be done with the massing to shift mass backwards and mitigate that transition from what's existing across the street to what's being proposed. I think that Mr. Whalen was pointing at some issues on the facade that I think would also help knit this project into the fabric of what's around it. There's some really large rectangular shaped openings, sort of horizontal openings. You know, it might look a little bit better if they were more vertical oriented openings, or at least have columns to simulate, or at least make it look like they're more vertical proportioned. And I think potentially along, I know you want to try and preserve some flat roof area for PV arrays, but I think potentially you could introduce some mansard or slope roof areas along the backside, along the railroad tracks, to help create some variation in the apparent massing. Any other comments?
Yes, Chair Moore, a couple of follow-up comments. The green screen, it seems like there's a dependency on the green screens, and those, to my mind, work against the Spanish colonial revival ethic, and so that's going to be a challenge to integrate, still keeping your naturally ventilated garage and have a green screen. Perhaps it's deeper set within the opening, but just somehow not reduce the architectural character while achieving your goal of natural ventilation. And then on the Calle Vallarta, there's one apartment that is really close out there. It's 4 stories tall. If that 4th floor, is that the one we're looking at? Is that? Yes, that seems incompatible with the neighborhood. Just that 4th floor on that one apartment block, if that could somehow be mitigated. Thank you, Chair Moore.
I didn't have a problem.
We do that. We're schizophrenic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have our list of comments. This is your last chance to add anything else. So.
I have a question, if I can, about the comments.
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson was talking about the possibility of maybe removing some of the tile roofs, like the larger hip roofs, and I just wanted to get the sense from the board, because that might help us integrate things a little better if we took that approach, understanding, Chair Moore, that you talked about adding some tile along the railroad side, but
Not necessarily tile, but
okay, more in
a sloped
in
roof.
Santa Barbara keeping, yeah. But is that a possible, if we had maybe more articulation of massing with less of those large hip roofs, is that something that we should explore?
Let's just go down the line and do a quick yes or no.
Yeah, a quick yes. I thought that was a very astute observation, especially when I look at your rendering from the play field across, that the reduction of the amount of red tile roof would be an asset.
Okay. Ms. Anderson? Your
Yes.
thoughts? Okay. Vice Chair Six?
No. Not along Vallarta.
Okay. Mr. Black, any thoughts?
I just sort of favor the way I see it here in the drawings.
Okay. I would say yes. I think it would help break up some of that long roof shape.
Okay.
Can I condition my yes? Or no?
Quickly, yes.
There must be, the relationship of tile to parapet should be, 4 to 1 for tile and one parapet, so there's only these splashes of the.
What if the parapet has tile?
All right.
It's just still not a leading.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
a close one.
Okay, yeah, it's close. Okay, those are our comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
There's no motions. Okay,
No, I can do it.
yeah, let's take a 5-minute recess, please. reopen our meeting and go on to item number 3, please, which is 540 West Pueblo Street. This is a continued item here for project design approval. The proposed project consists of a 2,107 square foot addition to the main cancer center building and an associated office space. The previous project approved on June 10th in 2010, including a new duplex that has not been constructed, a new parking lot, that's now been separated out, so that's not a part of this anymore. Public improvements along West Junipero include relocation of existing access ramp and crosswalk, installation of a new driveway for the new parking lot. Project received a community benefit designation by City Council, and Planning Commission approved an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration on December 1st of 2022. Project design approval is requested, and the project requires compliance with the project compatibility guidelines, and we last saw this September 6th of last year. Welcome back. And if we could have those minutes up from the last go-around. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Specify the stonework, matches. Start the end of the trellis as it intersects the addition. Okay. If you could introduce yourselves and walk us through the rest of your...
Brian Cornell and Lisa Lyles. So this is the existing site plan, so we're talking about the addition to the linear accelerator here. They've realized an important need, even though these are very expensive concrete structures. They're determined to build another one because of the community needs. So the parking lot, by the way, go ahead and go to the next slide, Lisa. The parking lot, you all reviewed in the consent agenda for final approval on that. So that's going forward. This illustrates in the shaded area that addition, which is some additional office space, but primarily the third vault. So this is just oriented differently. Go on to the... So this is pretty much what you saw before. The trellis, we are still showing it connected to the building. It just feels like that is the right thing to do just for the sun control on those, that one set of windows, but we can talk more about that. If we go to I think the renderings really show the intent of this whole thing. The linear accelerator building now is this gray concrete. So we are extruding that out into that garden area, and then likewise the office buildings or the office space is extended, but that we are cladding in the stone. As we talked about last time, it would be important to make sure that that stone matches. And that's really where we are. So we can talk about that trellis connection if we want, but I think otherwise it's fairly straightforward.
Okay, so just going down the list, the stone is specified to match, and the trellis connects, and that was the bulk of our concern. Okay. Let's open public comment.
Thank you. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip on the side of the room and turn it in. Not seeing any movement for that, turning to virtual. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on the item, please go ahead and raise your hands and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and then we did not receive any written correspondence. Back to you.
Okay, we'll close public comment and go to questions. Mr. Black, any questions?
No questions.
Vice Chair Six? No. Mr. Whalen?
None.
Ms. Anderson?
Just one. So the concrete, in the renderings, it looks white, but I just wanted to confirm it's actually concrete, like gray.
Well, it is a sack and patch concrete, so it is gray, yes, and it
Yeah.
will match the existing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's go to comments. Vice Chair Six. you're
Yeah, I
you're
think
itching.
we don't need any, I would make a motion for project design approval with indefinite continuance to consent as submitted.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? with
One
that?
question,
Yeah.
would the applicant be open to providing like an existing stone wall detail just to compare the new one is matching the existing?
So you mean do
The
like?
cap.
So somehow do a prototype, you mean, or?
No, just if you have your existing detail and then just show that your new one's matching or something like that. Would,
So provide an exhibit showing the previously approved stone wall detailing.
In paper only, correct?
yeah, just on paper.
Paper only.
You mean just as part of this?
As part of when you come back for final.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be clear next time.
Yeah.
I'd add that to my motion to show details of the stonework in reference to the existing details.
I do have one small question. Mr. Cornell, from your previous visit, I remember asking if the trellis actually intersects with the new stone wall, or does it hold off to some degree?
Well, it needs to intersect to be supported by the stone wall, and what I struggled with was sort of the uncomfortable gap that was left, and I would really need to pull the trellis almost all the way back to the column, and that's why I felt it made more sense to connect the trellis to the stone.
Thank you.
Okay. We're satisfied with the motion. Okay, let's take a
Just
vote.
add the project compatibility findings.
So
Thank you.
this project is compatible with the following findings, that it is consistent with the design guidelines of the area being eclectic and having the project be there as part of that architecture in the area. Number two, it's compatible with the architectural character of the city and the neighborhood for the same reason. Number three, there's no significant increase of mass, bulk, and scale as the addition is to the rear of the project and is in less and of less height than the original building. There are no adjacent landmarks or historic resources affected. There are no public views of the ocean and mountains affected, and there is use of open space and the use of open space and landscaping is appropriate.
Okay. Well, let's take our vote.
Thank you. I'll take roll call vote. Chair Moore?
Yes.
Vice Chair Six?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Whalen?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And
So I'll
then
stay here.
on to item number 4.
Bye. Thank you.
And Mr. Russell, pull that up. Yeah. So this is 601 Santa Barbara Street. And this is a in-progress review. So this is a proposal for the new police station at the Coda Commuter Lot. And the project is back in front of us with some specific pieces that they would like us to review. Thank you for providing that little short memo. That's what we will focus on today.
So, do you want to look at the memo?
Well, I just want to, I want to make sure we sort of confine our discussion to what you want feedback on.
So we're going to
specifically.
look at the revised landscape and hardscape at the entry plaza and at that MTT bus stop. And that also includes then the historic Lincoln School display. We've revised just a little bit, and I think you'll like the fenestrations in the building. And we've also been able to minimize that structural support for the PV. So I just explained your memo, Mr. Hornbuckle. Brian Cornell, by the way, I didn't reintroduce myself, and Jeff Hornbuckle.
Jeff Hornbuckle.
Brad
collective.
Hess, to my left.
Nicole Horn, CDMLA Landscape Architect.
It's just, that was the first page and not.
Oh, I see.
So then just page 2 is the actual.
Got it.
So maybe we should just go to Nicole's sheet. I think is that next, or do we have the renderings next? Okay. Sure. So we've actually placed these elevations top to bottom, so you can see the existing is on the bottom and the proposed revisions are on the top, so there's not much to see in this particular view. It's pretty much remain the same. Here you can see that the openings, the fenestrations on the second floor have been reduced in scale, I think work better. And a little bit of change to the fenestrations also there on the corner. We start on the right-hand side, same thing. You see those large windows that we had previously have been reduced in size. So generally, those windows have just become a little more diminutive along the way. And then along this side, where the MTD bus stop is, we basically have articulated, and we'll see more of that in Nicole's presentation, that bus stop. I don't think there's any changes here. A change that you won't really see, but I think it's important to point out, is between the police station building and the parking structure, we've actually made quite a few changes relative to those fenestrations and in kind of articulated the stair tower along that side and extended that stair tower to the roof so that we have access to the roof. Oh, yes, thank you. So before we had a continuous connection at the basement to the building, and now we have eliminated that, which is going to allow us to plant that courtyard space between the buildings, and we have basically tunnels now that are connecting the basement parking structure to the building. And then on this side, I don't think there's much. So. Oh, that's right. So this is actually looking the opposite way we were just looking. So we're also going to add green screens just to kind of shield and soften when people are looking out of the police station towards the parking structure, to soften that view. So these are the elevation. Again, these, in this case, they are side by side instead of top to bottom, but and not much change in that top rendering. In the bottom, you can see how those windows changed along Santa Barbara Street.
And the elevator access.
Yeah, we eliminated, but previously, we had an exterior access to the elevator, and we've since eliminated that for a number of reasons.
So again, not a lot of this is a little bit of a Where's Waldo, but it's primarily those second floor windows that have changed.
We also revised some of the mullion
Breakups.
Breakups, yeah, thank you. You can see the previous version had these larger openings, but we've gone with back to the kind of more traditional breakups.
So then here you see in the lower views, what we are proposing is really a very simple trellis that basically reflects the solar panel array on the roof here, so that that would be covered with these solar panels, which have a slight transparency to them. They're really quite beautiful when you look up through them. And we've also, Commissioner Six, you'll be happy to know we've been able to get rid of the castellated beams up there and just gone with a more, basically a more slim I-beam to handle the load.
It's a little bit difficult to see in this. It's actually very difficult to see in this. Does it, well, oh, that's because I'm on the You
Yeah.
can see we've added at the perimeter of the panel layout, this metal, perforated metal kind of edging to provide just a little bit of detail. It'll cast some shadows, and we just thought that's a nice way to sort of terminate that, those panels with that little bit of detailing.
And kind of fascia.
It'll be a flat, yeah,
Extends out beyond the PV panel.
exactly, yeah.
And the pattern of that we haven't finally selected, but basically we would carry forward the idea of some of the screening that we've got elsewhere on the building.
Yeah,
It would be a consistent detail.
That's right.
Can I drive the mouse?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
zoom a little bit too. So this linear parklet that we're calling it right here along Coda Street, we've expanded and looked at what this MTD bus shelter would look like. And we'll show you that in section. You just saw the rendering of it. But the idea is we're going to bring those solar panels down from the roof and mimic that in a scaled down version here on Coda Street. And that helps also illustrate, our dedication to net zero and allow for some public, utility. You can charge your phone or whatever at the bus station. And then we've expanded this plaza here in plan. And our idea is that we'd be looking at a new way to display the Lincoln plaques. So before, those were just ceramic tile plaques displayed within the old bus shelter. We're moving them out of the bus shelter, giving them their own space here in the plaza. And so we're trying to engage people from the street to kind of like walk through this area. And what those plaques are and the content of that is all still to be determined. We've briefly met with the city historian, Nicole Hernandez, on the existing plaques, looking at a new type of display, and she's really excited about, and so are we, like telling new stories. So expanding the, knowledge in the community about what the Lincoln School was, not just images of the school building, but the students who attended and their relevance in the community. And then I guess I'll go to the other page. Zoom in here at the entrance. So I brought up the elevator because we don't have that access anymore, so we can put planting in front of it. So we've expanded the landscape area. We've moved the bikes that were previously here down to the public frontage on Santa Barbara, and I think that's just going to be a little bit nicer and safer for car-bike interactions. And then I'll zoom kind of out. What we had before, and I don't know if you can remember it, but we had like a palm court within here. And so what we've done instead is extended the palm alley a little bit and then stopped it right here. So instead of extending the palm court up into the the main entrance, we're stopping it, and we're thinking that that is more of a gateway. So it'll stop, it'll open up at the lobby, and then we're trying to plant here as much as we can on the opposite side, so that the palms really help guide you to the entrance. It opens up, and then it extends beyond. So the palms are more of a statement and a gateway than potentially, let's just say, making it difficult to maneuver within the entrance. So I think it's a more urban design, and it'll function a little bit better. And then you can see between the buildings here, this is the edge of the parking, and these columns on the left. So as Jeff mentioned, we've got in-grade planters now, and these rooms here will look out onto the courtyard, and I think that's going to be really significant, especially on the second floor, where there's a debriefing room, and it'll be, really nice for everybody, all the staff, to have kind of a more calm space in between the buildings here and some protection to that parking garage.
Do you want to mention the parking?
Oh, yeah.
paving?
Another cool detail, we've reorganized the parking lot striping and the paving patterns to align with the actual striping. So we've got a shift in the orientation of our permeable pavers here to delineate the parking spaces.
And one other thing, the little statue that currently is in front of the police station, we're placing right there, which people will see when they park, but also it'll be very visible through that large window from the lobby area.
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
I really tried. Not yet, anyway.
It was just already made.
Sorry, so here's the sections and elevations. So this is the MTD shelter here, the solar panels. This is mimicking this tapered that's going to happen up above at the parking garage. And then the elevation here. So these bright yellow ideas, that's just a placeholder, but we're trying to call attention to the fact that it'll be unique and kind of a art sculpture moment as well as informational.
And those columns are steel tubes, painted. I think they're 10 inches or?
Oh, these columns.
Yeah.
Yeah, here
So they're large.
at the bus shelter.
Okay.
And I don't think the intent was not to have bright yellow.
Correct, yeah. That's just
That's just an indicator of where those
right, make
Lincoln
it,
displays will be.
that's kind of the new change here. So that's it, yeah, we are starting on a whole new process of, what those displays will be like. And we'll probably go to HLC, and it'll be fun.
Okay, anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, let's open public comment.
Thank you. If there is anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip. Not seeing any movement, so I'll turn to virtual. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on the item, please raise your hand on Zoom and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands on virtual either. We did receive written correspondence from Paulina Kahn, which was distributed to the board prior to the meeting. With that, back to you, Chair Moore. Thank you.
All right, let's close public comment and go to questions. Ms. Anderson, you want to start?
Sure. On the entry doors on both sides, it looks like the header for the door has increased in size. Is that the minimum size it can be? I'm assuming that's for all the electronics for the doors and, yeah.
You're talking about here at the main.
Yes.
At the main entrance?
Yeah.
So there's a few reasons for this. So, whoops, I'm sorry. I zoomed out. The exterior of the building has ballistic rating requirements. So different levels have different ballistic rating requirements. So at the public lobby, that ballistic rating level is at the first floor only. And so because these openings are so large, that ballistic glass is extremely heavy. And so that header is essentially delineating between the ballistic rated glass below and the non-ballistic glass
Sure.
above.
Yeah, I guess my question is that the minimum size that it can be?
We may be able to reduce that. I need to just work with
Okay.
the structural engineer. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have
I
an
was just
answer for you,
curious.
but we can look at that for sure.
Okay. And then on the PV support, you mentioned the perforated panel at the end, and then you said it was in other locations. Can you just remind me the other locations that you're proposing?
For the perforated panel detail. So it'll be
Yes.
at the south end of the parking garage and the north end of the parking garage.
Okay.
And then there's a solar array over the third floor break room for the police department. And I can show you that in roof plan where that occurs. If I can get to it. So that happens right here. So at the edge, we would provide that detail as well.
Okay.
Whoops.
Thank you.
Mr. Whalen, any questions?
Questions about the interstitial area between the two buildings, specifically the plantings. Could you talk a little bit more about the type of palms and the types of plants you have proposed in there?
Sure. So right now we're just showing king palms, and the idea is that we want sunlight to come in, so it's not fully palmed. And we are proposing king palms along Santa Barbara as well, and they're in a much more formal pattern. So I think that's actually something we want to look at as we move into CDs, is changing up some of the species and providing more variation.
Okay. And I don't see it on this plan, but you talked about a stair tower in there. That's a new element, whereas before you just had bridge connections.
So the stair was there previously, it just wasn't expressed on the exterior of the building. We've actually bumped the stair out to express it more on this elevation, and we've extended it to the roof so that there is easier
So
roof.
so it's not an elevator tower? It's a stair tower?
This is not an elevator tower, yeah,
Okay.
it's a.
But there are still connections at every floor, right?
Correct. Yeah, let me go to that
Yes.
elevation.
See, you can see my confusion by that drawing.
So you can see
Yeah,
those connections.
So this is that stair tower, and then these are the bridge connections.
Those are the bridge
between
connections.
The buildings here, and then the below grade or below ground bridges at the basement
So
level.
one would circulate up the tower, out, and then across the,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this stair, yeah, yes. yeah,
got it.
Exactly.
That clarifies my question. Thank you.
Vice Chair Six.
Yes, I noticed a slight difference in your rendering at the green roof at the front corner of the building. If you remember my concerns about the maintenance and visual of the edge of the green roof garden.
Keep going.
Right there. So, so you've developed the thinking or no?
I don't think that changed, but one thing we actually haven't pointed out that's important is we don't want to bring any of this water internally, and a lot of it we need to bring down to the planters. So we are expressing external downspouts, as you see, that are copper going down the face of the building.
Okay.
But
And
I
then,
don't think anything at the top of that roof, green roof, changed.
Okay. All right. And then if you go to zoom in on the PV edge, yeah, that's a good one. Excellent. So I don't quite understand. Obviously you have an overhang outrigger along the column line, but then you have that same expression mid-beam that seems, but that beam doesn't go back into the structure, correct?
That's right. It's like
It's truly an outrigger.
I think it's a 20-foot span, so.
Yeah, I get
We
it.
just felt that it needed some intermediate.
I'm just wondering if it just looks, especially the bottom flange, looks a little awkward, maybe the intermediate ones could be slightly diminutive, slightly smaller than the main beam expression, still doing your interruption of that.
Yeah,
But
they absolutely could.
do a different, they're obviously a different function. So that refinement would be nice. And those are my only questions.
Okay. Mr. Black, any questions?
Could you remind me, the canopy trees just to the east of the bus stop along Coda, what species are those? There's
The
like
existing
4 of
trees?
them? No, there's four new trees shown there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to the east, towards,
Right
yeah.
here, we're talking
Yeah,
about
there,
these.
4 of them.
Yeah.
What, Nicole, what species are those again? I mean, in the renderings, they look like olives to me, but,
I think they actually are olives.
okay. And then there's olives on the north side near the main entrance, where the guest parking is, up against the building there as well.
Yeah. I think we had two, sorry, I think we had two options here, but I think we're gonna go with the olive.
Got it, okay. And then how wide is that planter where you've got, along Santa Barbara Street, where you've got the king palms? I'm just curious. You know, are you concerned at all about having those palms up that close to the building? I mean, I understand the approach with creating an LA, but I was just wondering how wide that is.
Looks like it's 5 feet.
Is it? Oh, okay. Well, that helps. Not the parkway, but against the
Yeah,
building.
Yeah.
Right. And what's the planted size of these things? Are they going to be in conflict with
Yeah,
the
you do,
building?
right there.
Well,
Don't you have-
yeah, my suspicion is the canopy's going to
I
Kinda
think
rub
it's,
up against the building,
it's
but-
about 4 feet. I think we would be looking at putting 36-inch boxes on that.
Okay, so 4 feet, so you plant in the middle, so your
4'6",
your
yeah.
trunks are going to be 2 feet from the building. So are you comfortable with that? Anticipating that a canopy on a king palm, I know this because I've got them down my driveway too, and I just know how tall and how wide they get. But,
Yeah.
my other concern with that is, you know, along Coda Street, you've got the olive trees, so there's nice massing against the building, but, I mean, ultimately, what you're going to have on Santa Barbara Street, well, you've got the existing Washingtonias, you know, with significant height on the trunks, and then eventually, you're going to get the same look with the king palms, albeit shorter. I'm just wondering whether you're concerned about, because when you look, you had one elevation where it's basically, you're going to end up with, that whole elevation is just going to be some, obviously some canopy at the top, but you're going to have just lots of trunks against a rather sizable elevation building-wise.
Right, and that is something that we've, we initially talked to Public Works about this because we had initially proposed a larger canopy tree in the parkway, and they didn't want it. They wanted palms. They were concerned about issues with the utilities, so they specifically did not want a canopy tree in the parkway. And so then we were looking at doing the palms in between the Washingtonias, and then that's why we ended up with this LA idea. But I think your point to the understory or the mid-range below the palms is a good one, and I've been trying to work with our civil engineer to relocate. We have biofiltration areas on site in that same area in between the palms. So to get taller plantings in there, that's something that, you know, I would like to do, and we just have to work that out with civil.
Okay. Well, that was my question, but it's probably also my comment too. But I'm just concerned about the way that's going to look ultimately, with just a lot of trunk and not much massing. But those are my only questions / comments at this point.
Okay. Tell me about, so the second floor window changes, is that driven, is that just availability, cost issue? What drove that change?
I mean, really a number of things. One of it was, comments that we heard from this board previously about reducing the size of openings. It was, based on the, what the function is inside the space. It was also a result of, ballistic rated windows and reducing that, as much as we can. So there were a number of reasons.
Okay, and then the same question, so at the corner, the windows, kind of the sill came up, they got, I don't know if they got actually the
They did
head-
get, they got a little bit smaller, and the sill did come up again. That's a ballistic issue. Having that glass, sort of as a rule, at 48 inches above finished floor, so that when someone's sitting at a desk, they're protected from.
Okay, that's kind of too bad. I think one of the successes on that corner were those kind of grand windows, which I thought was nice and really helped.
They're still pretty big though, right? Those windows are.
They're very big, yeah.
Maybe go back to the comparable renderings.
Can I make a quick comment?
The sill
Yeah,
slopes,
absolutely.
doesn't it?
The sill does slope.
So the sill slopes down to the bottom of the stone.
It doesn't slope all the way to the stone. You can see it slopes. It kind of stops halfway between the window sill and the top of the stone.
But it could.
Could, I suppose. It's a little tricky detail, but.
So if I could, just the comment from my perspective is that ballistic glass is, the level 5 that we're looking at is about this thick. So it requires an entire steel frame just to hold it, and the cost is enormous. But we also made a commitment to the chief that we would make sure that this was not compromised, that this part of the building, the entire first floor, is going to be completely safe. So they don't have to be concerned about it. So it's not just bulletproof, it's bomb-proof. I mean, the whole
I understand.
first floor.
I understand. I'm
And so
just
that-
talking about
That
the-
just ended up reducing the size.
Sure, I get it. I understand the parameters and the constraints that you're operating under. Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, so if we could go, if we could quickly go back to your list, just to refresh our memories, and let's try and keep our comments directed at that list, if we could. Okay.
Sorry, so can you guys read that okay?
Yeah. Who would like to start?
I can start.
Great.
Okay, the revised hardscape at the entry, I think is appropriate. I think it's unfortunate that we lost, those significant trees that directed you in. That was kind of a concept that had been there from the beginning, so I feel like that's unfortunate we lost that. The MTD bus stop, I think, is a great idea that you make it look like the solar panel trellis above and that you're bringing solar down, so I think that's awesome. The school display, that's the one next to the MTD bus stop. Cool, look forward to that. And the revised fenestration, I think in most locations it was successful. And the PV structure, I think, is more successful now that you've simplified it and reduced the scale. Something that you added were the downspouts. I would consider how you make those so that no one can climb on them. Just if we're talking about security stuff. But I don't mind them. They look like a nice detail that's added to the building. So.
Okay. I watched it.
Yes, speaking directly to your list, the revisions at the main entry building plaza I'm sort of torn about moving the bikes because we have bikes versus car and bikes versus pedestrians, although cars have to back out and go out. So I think you've made a fair decision here, though. In general, I don't like to mix bikes and pedestrians, so the closer the bike parking can get to the curb cut to minimize that, the better. Not that they'll use it that way, but instructively, right? I think your revised fenestration and moves towards a more traditional design is very successful. And those are all of my comments towards your memo.
Okay, Vice Chair Six.
Yes, I think all the changes introduced are excellent. Very nice refinement to the building. As just the minor comments on the hierarchy of outriggers on the PV solar support. And it would be nice to bring the sloped sills of those windows in the front corner formed down to the stone to make them more look like openings than a punch in the wall.
Mr. Black?
I would agree with all those comments. Just a quick notion, the bus stop is going to have enriched paving. Is it going to be permeable paving there as well, just to delineate that space?
Correct, yes, the permeable pavers.
Good, I'm done, thank you.
Okay. I agree that the landscape and hardscape are evolving nicely. I am torn about the change at the entry. I did kind of like the previous setup with the way it was. It made more sense to have the bikes kind of tucked in onto the property. It seems a little safer for the person riding the bike to lock your bike up there versus more, out on the street. I think the bus stop is great. I think the school display is going to be great. Look forward to seeing that in its finalized form. I think the bulk of the fenestration changes are good, as Mr. Whalen recognized. They're moving more towards a traditional proportion, which I think is great. I think it's unfortunate that those large windows on the corners had to get reduced in size, but hopefully there's a way that you can kind of enhance or sort of fool the eye into making it feel like they're as tall.
I think
as
what
they were.
Richard suggested will go a long way towards that.
And I think the PV system, it is what it is. Your notion of trying to finish the edge, I think, is smart because that's part of what makes it look very techy is seeing the edges of the individual panels. Maybe think about how, instead of that, how that finishing edge is. You mentioned that it's like horizontal and flat. Maybe it needs to turn down to have some thickness so it really feels like it's a fascia of some sort. I don't know. That's my initial gut reaction to that. Those are my comments.
Do we need to make a motion?
No,
Well, I'm just going to make a couple of observations outside of your memo. You might consider aligning the Santa Barbara Street palms with the fenestration so you don't end up with, which is difficult because the windows on the first and second floor don't line up, but you might consider that. And you might consider some Howias in that interstitial space have a very slender trunk, and they, with Mr. Black's weighing in on it, they might do well in that limited light and be very interesting specimens. Thank you.
Yeah. And since Mr. Whalen went off the list, I feel like every time I see the little light on the corner of the building, it just sort of feels diminutive relative to the scale. So if there's a larger version of that, maybe take a look at that.
I have your quote, I think, from the first meeting highlighted, hanging on my desk, so I haven't forgotten.
I forget what it was, but.
Do you remember? It's hanging at your desk.
I don't remember exactly, but.
Okay, anything else? No motion required. This is just a collection of comments. Thank you.
Appreciate you working with us on this. Yeah, how do you want to continue this? You know, it's a big building and it's going to have a lot of details, so I don't know whether you want to, we want to come to the full board with the full big package of drawings and go through it, or if we should consider like a subcommittee, which I know has been done in the past for larger projects to review details. I just want to find out how you would like us to proceed from this point forward, because we're really at the end of design development and now going into construction documents.
I would kind of want to defer to the board on that. I think that we've heard that if it's going to push a housing project, and I was working with Jeff on this, that's not ideal. We might have to bump your item if a housing project does take precedent over it. But if the board feels comfortable seeing these in-progress reviews and it's something that's helpful, I think keeping the scope to a really narrow subject of like what you are looking for feedback on is helpful. That's been a request from the board as well. But I don't,
Yeah.
and I could go to my supervisor as well and see if a special meeting would be warranted. So I'm happy to entertain.
Yeah, I think if possible, it would be nice, because it is a large building, it would be ideal if we could kind of break it up into here are the details for fenestration, and then here's the details for roof treatments, and just try and break it into two probably groups of detail review.
And
Vice Chair Six, you
I'd be
have
willing
some
to,
input?
I'd be willing to work on a subcommittee to expedite the final throes of this.
Okay, well, let's
Anybody else?
Let's talk about the.
Well, I already feel like we have a reduced committee with the absence of Mr. Nunn, and I would speak against a subcommittee.
Yeah, so we can then, what we can do is, I think maybe just end up, for lack of a better word, sort of a tranche of details and break it into multiple meetings, and maybe devote one to the final landscape plan and one to, like you said, fenestration details, one for that light fixture on the corner.
I think that would work best.
That's fine. I think we can do that.
I'm not against scheduling an additional meeting for such an important public building as this.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
work with you, Will.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll be a while before we come back, I think, at this point, but yeah, I don't want to just dump 300 details on you at one meeting.
Yeah.
And ask for final.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Appreciate your comments, as
And with
always.
that, we can close our meeting. Have a good night, everyone.